Hello there, and welcome to Planet in Question, the quiet little corner where curiosity takes its time and questions are allowed to breathe. Tonight, I'd like to invite you into a thought that has lingered on the edges of philosophy, science, and myth for a very long time. It's the thought that maybe humanity is not the grand conclusion of Earth's story, not the ultimate product of billions of years of change, but simply one experiment among many. An attempt. A possibility that, like countless others before it, may flourish for a while and then fade, leaving the stage for whatever comes next. Before we begin drifting through this idea, I'd like to bring the moment gently into focus. Where are you listening from right now? Perhaps you are lying in bed, the room dim, the weight of blankets gathering around you like the comforting folds of the night itself. Maybe you're sitting in a chair with headphones, a lamp glowing softly in the corner. Perhaps it's not night at all, maybe the sun is bright, you're travelling somewhere, or you've simply found a pocket of calm in the middle of your day. Wherever you are, this moment belongs to you, and yet we share it. Through a simple thread of voice and thought, here we are, connected. It feels fitting, doesn't it? Because the question we're about to wander into is itself about connection, about how we fit into a story that stretches far beyond our own. We humans tend to imagine ourselves as the central chapter, the ones who were meant to arrive all along. Our myths describe us as chosen, our sciences often frame us as the pinnacle of evolution, and our histories naturally emphasize our own significance. But when we step back, when we stretch our imagination across the deep timeline of Earth, our sense of certainty begins to soften. Think about it this way. Earth has existed for about 4.5 billion years. For almost all of that time, there were no humans. There weren't even mammals for most of it. Entire oceans formed and drained away. Mountains rose taller than Everest, only to erode into grains of sand. Continents collided and split apart like rafts on a restless sea. Entire ecosystems bloomed with strange and wonderful creatures, and then vanished without leaving much more than a scattering of fossils. By comparison, our own story is barely a whisper. If Earth's history were condensed into a single day, humans would arrive only in the last few seconds before midnight. All of civilization, every kingdom, invention, and dream would flicker by in less than the blink of an eye. And yet here we are, telling ourselves that we are the main event. What if that isn't so? What if intelligence itself is not rare but one of nature's recurring experiments? We already know that sparks of it glow across the animal kingdom. Crows can solve puzzles with the cleverness of a child. Dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors and invent new ways to play. Octopuses use tools, escape from aquariums, and show flashes of problem-solving that seem far too advanced for creatures with such short lifespans. Elephants grieve their dead. Whales sing songs that carry across oceans. If intelligence can appear in so many corners of life today, who's to say it hasn't flared brightly before us, perhaps even taking root in entire civilizations we can no longer see? It may sound far-fetched, but Earth is not a perfect archivist. It remembers selectively. Stone preserves some fossils, but not most. Layers of sediment capture hints of climate, but erase the details of daily lives. Human cities, if abandoned, begin to crumble in only a few decades. Within a few thousand years, nature takes nearly everything back. Within millions of years, mountains grind the evidence to dust. If an earlier civilization had lived and vanished tens of millions of years ago, would we even know? Or would its traces be hidden, folded deep into the rocks, disguised as natural oddities we've mistaken for chance? That possibility has even been given a name, the Silurian hypothesis, a question asked by scientists themselves. Could we detect an industrial civilization in the geological record millions of years later, even if no artifacts remained? The answer is uncertain, but the very asking of it reminds us how fragile evidence truly is. Perhaps humanity is not the first experiment in civilization at all, only the most recent. And beyond the scientific wondering, there are the myths, the stories told by people long before modern science gave us its timelines. Myths of Atlantis, swallowed by the sea. Stories of beings who came from the sky and shaped humanity. Tales of underground worlds, hidden cities, and forgotten ancestors. These may not be literal truths, but they echo a shared intuition that we are not alone in our role, not the first and not the last. But what if we widen the thought even more? What if the experiment is not only Earth's? What if the universe itself is a vast field of trials, where life arises again and again, tested under different conditions in different forms with different outcomes. Sometimes the experiment might burn brightly, building intelligence, art, and technology. Other times it may remain simple, content to linger in oceans as microbes and coral reefs. Sometimes it may vanish in catastrophes, only to restart in new forms millions of years later. If that is so, then our presence here is not evidence of uniqueness, but of continuity. We are simply part of the great unfolding, one experiment among many. Of course, this line of thinking raises an even stranger possibility. If Earth is an experiment, is anyone observing? Is there intention behind it? Or is it simply the blind unfolding of natural laws? Scientists remind us that conditions on Earth are unusually balanced. Our planet rests in the so-called Goldilocks zone, with just the right warmth for liquid water, with an atmosphere that nurtures life, and with a magnetic field that shields us from radiation. To some, this feels like coincidence. To others, it feels suspiciously like preparation, as though the stage was set to see what life would do when given the chance. And here we are, living out one of the results. We build, we destroy, we create art and war, we dream of futures, and we wonder about our origins. Maybe the very act of wondering is part of the experiment. Maybe asking the question is as important as answering it. If this all feels a little heavy, remember, the goal tonight isn't to prove or disprove anything. It's simply to let the imagination wander, to think of humanity not as a permanent monument, but as a chapter in a book that is still being written. To imagine that long after we are gone, other experiments will continue, rising and falling, leaving their own traces for whatever follows. There's comfort in that thought too, that life doesn't stop with us, that the story keeps flowing. So as you listen, I invite you to ease into the possibility. Humanity might be special, but we might also be temporary. We might be a remarkable experiment, one that will be remembered in stone and atmosphere, or we might be just one in a sequence of countless trials that this planet has hosted. Either way, the meaning of our moment isn't diminished. If anything, it's enriched, because being part of something vast and ongoing is its own kind of miracle. And so, as we begin this journey together, let's hold the question gently. What if humanity is just one of many experiments? Let it settle in your mind, the way twilight settles over the horizon. No rush, no pressure, only the quiet recognition that the universe may be larger, stranger, and more patient than we can ever fully know. 1. A fragile place in time. If you close your eyes for a moment and picture the entire history of the Earth, what do you see? Perhaps you imagine dinosaurs roaming across vast plains, or glaciers grinding their way through valleys, or maybe you see the continents drifting slowly apart as if pushed by some unseen hand. Whatever image arises, it is worth remembering that this history is so deep, so broad, that the human part of it is almost imperceptibly small. The whole span of our existence is just the faintest sliver at the very end of an unimaginably long story. We often feel like the main characters, but when measured against the age of the planet, we are more like a brief footnote, flickering into being and already beginning to fade. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. That number alone is difficult to hold in the mind. It is not just large, it is almost beyond the scale of what human thought can comfortably manage. To make it more tangible, scientists sometimes compress that span into a single day. Imagine the planet forming at midnight, molten and chaotic, slowly cooling under a storm of asteroids and fire. By 4 o'clock in the morning, the first simple microbes stir in the oceans. They multiply, change, and persist for hours upon hours of this long day. By evening, more complex creatures arrive, still in the sea, moving with fins and soft bodies. Dinosaurs do not appear until late at night, around 11 o'clock, and we humans, our entire existence would emerge in the final seconds before the next midnight. All of civilization, every city, every invention, every song and story would pass in less than a single blink of that cosmic eye. When seen this way, our place in time feels fragile, almost insubstantial. We carry ourselves with the confidence of permanence, building monuments of stone and towers of steel. But in the deep measure of Earth's history, these are as temporary as sandcastles at the tide's edge. Even the greatest of empires will one day be ground down into dust, swept aside by wind, water, and the slow patience of geology. What we call ancient history, the pyramids, The earliest writings, the first cities, is not ancient at all in planetary terms. It is closer to a heartbeat, a sudden flash in a long silence. And yet we treat ourselves as if we were inevitable, as though the unfolding of life was always meant to arrive at us. But was it? Or are we just one experiment among many, one of countless trials that life has conducted across the eons? Already we know that other creatures have ruled this planet far longer than we have. Trilobites, those small armoured arthropods, scuttled across the seafloor for over 270 million years. Dinosaurs thrived for about 165 million years. By contrast, anatomically modern humans have been around for only about 200,000 years, and our civilizations only for the last 10,000. To call us temporary would be an understatement. To the Earth, we are less than a passing shadow. This perspective doesn't need to diminish us, it can also soften the weight we carry. If we are temporary, then perhaps we do not need to act as though the whole story of the world rests on our shoulders. Perhaps our role is to be here now, in this moment, as one of Earth's many experiments in consciousness and culture. Just as the forests of the Carboniferous Age, with their towering trees and giant dragonflies, had their moment, and just as the great reptiles of the Mesozoic Age had theirs, so too we are having ours. But the Earth has no obligation to preserve us forever, just as it had no obligation to preserve them. Life flows onward, reshaping itself with every turn. The fragility of our place in time is also visible in the record of extinctions. 5 times already, Earth has witnessed mass extinctions that reshaped everything. The end of the Permian period wiped out nearly 90% of species. The asteroid that struck 66 million years ago ended the age of dinosaurs in what must have seemed like an instant. Each of these moments was a clearing of the board, a sudden reset that made space for something new. If such events have happened 5 times before, why should we believe they will not happen again? We may be midway through another such transition even now, driven partly by our own hands. When you think of humanity in this way as fragile, as temporary, as balanced precariously on the edge of time, it invites a different kind of humility. We are not the final act. We may not even be the most interesting act. We are one attempt, one unfolding possibility in the long experiment of life on Earth. And if that is so, then the question becomes not whether we will last forever, but what we will do with the moment we have. Imagine looking at Earth not from the ground, but from far above, from a vantage point where centuries pass like heartbeats. You would see forests advancing and retreating with the ice. You would see deserts bloom and vanish. You would see rivers carving new paths, mountains rising and crumbling. And only in the faintest shimmer at the surface would you notice the brief construction and collapse of human settlements. Roads would appear like lines of light, then vanish. Cities would glow for a moment and then fade. The whole of our history would look less like permanence and more like sparks in a long night. And yet, within those sparks, something remarkable happens. For a moment, the Earth knows itself. Through us, and perhaps through other creatures too, the planet gains a kind of awareness. We are made of its elements: iron, carbon, water, stone, and somehow those elements have arranged themselves into eyes that look outward, minds that question, voices that tell stories. Even if it lasts only for a moment, even if we are just a brief experiment, that moment is extraordinary. The Earth has spoken through trilobites and ammonites, through reptiles and mammals, and now it speaks through us. Tomorrow, it may speak through something else. So here we stand, a fragile species in a fragile place in time, at once insignificant and deeply meaningful. Insignificant because our presence is so short compared to the vast ages that came before and will come after. Meaningful because we are part of the great rhythm, one verse in the song of life that has been sung across billions of years. Fragility, after all, does not cancel beauty. A flower that blooms for only a day is no less radiant. A spark that glows for a second is no less light. Perhaps that is the right way to see ourselves, not as the final experiment, but as one of many, brief but brilliant in our own time. And as we let that thought settle, we can begin to imagine the experiments that may have come before us, and the ones that may still lie ahead. Humanity may be fragile, but we are not alone in that fragility. Every species, every civilization, every attempt at life's great expression has shared the same condition. It may be the most universal truth of all, that to exist is to be temporary, to rise and to fall, and to give space for what comes next. 2. Nature's endless trials. When we think of experiments, we often imagine a laboratory, a space carefully arranged with tools and glassware, where hands in white coats test ideas in the hope of discovering something new. But what if we zoomed out and realized that Earth itself is the laboratory, and life itself is the experiment? For more than 4 billion years, this planet has been running trial after trial, some long and steady, others abrupt and short-lived. Each has explored different ways that existence might unfold. The laboratory of Earth doesn't use glass or steel, but oceans, mountains, atmosphere, and time. And its experiments are written not in notebooks, but in fossils, in stone layers, in chemical signatures hidden beneath our feet. Every creature that has ever lived is part of that ongoing trial. Some experiments were spectacular successes for a time. Trilobites scuttled across the seafloor for hundreds of millions of years, adapting into countless forms, their hard shells leaving shimmering fossils for us to marvel at. Ammonites spiraled through the oceans in their coiled shells, thriving through periods of abundance until they too vanished in one of Earth's mass extinctions. Dinosaurs reigned over land, sea, and air with astonishing diversity. From towering sauropods that stretched longer than city buses to delicate bird-like creatures that danced across ancient forests. They dominated the world for longer than humans can easily comprehend 165 million years of ruling the Earth. And then, suddenly, the experiment ended. An asteroid, no more than 6 miles wide, collided with the planet and reshaped everything. When one experiment ends, another begins. After the dinosaurs fell, mammals, which had been living in the shadows for so long, surged into the open. Their experiment had been modest until then, small-bodied, mostly nocturnal, careful and quiet. But freed from the giants, they began to diversify into new forms. Some became great whales exploring the depths of the oceans. Some became primates, swinging through the trees, their hands and eyes growing ever more skillful. Some became the ancestors of humanity. The story of life is not a straight line of improvement, but a sprawling set of trials, each shaped by what came before, each vulnerable to sudden shifts. It is important to remember that most of Earth's experiments have ended not with gradual decline, but with abrupt, almost violent resets. The end-Permian extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying, wiped out around 90% of marine species and 70% of land species. For a time, the Earth must have felt almost empty, its once thriving ecosystems reduced to silence. And yet from that silence new forms arose, different from what had come before, filling the spaces left behind. Nature does not simply end one chapter, it clears the stage and allows another to begin. This cycle has repeated again and again. Trial, collapse, renewal. We humans sometimes imagine ourselves as exempt from that rhythm, but we are not. We are an experiment too, fragile and temporary, though astonishing in its own way. For the first time, Earth's experiment has produced beings who can reflect on the experiment itself. We are creatures who not only live, but also ask why we live, who not only survive, but wonder what survival means. That alone is extraordinary, but extraordinary does not mean permanent. If other species as mighty and long-lived as the dinosaurs could vanish, then so could we. The laboratory of Earth has no favourites. It runs trials, observes their outcomes, and then resets when conditions demand it. And what exactly is being tested? Perhaps resilience. Life is endlessly creative in finding ways to persist. It has taken root beside boiling hydrothermal vents in the deepest oceans, where sunlight never reaches. It has flourished in frozen tundras, in deserts, in caves sealed away from the surface. It has endured floods, droughts, asteroid strikes, and volcanic winters. Each survival is an experiment in adaptation. Each failure is an experiment too, showing what does not work, what cannot endure. Perhaps what Earth is really testing is the boundaries of possibility, what shapes life can take, what strategies it can use, how far it can stretch. Sometimes, when we look at fossils or study evolutionary history, we focus on the winners, the lineages that survived long enough to reach us. But the laboratory of life has been filled with losers too, with experiments that lasted briefly and then disappeared. There were fish with armoured heads, amphibians with strange limbs, mammals with giant fangs and horns. Some lasted for millions of years, some for much less. but all of them represent paths that could have gone further if circumstances had been kinder. In another timeline, perhaps one of those experiments would have flourished into intelligence and culture, and we would not be here at all. This thought, rather than frightening, can be strangely comforting. It suggests that humanity is not the sole bearer of Earth's story, not the one chosen purpose of evolution, but part of a tapestry much larger than ourselves. Our presence here is not the grand conclusion, but one ongoing trial. And if we vanish, the experiment will continue. Something else will rise, different but connected, carrying the thread forward in ways we cannot yet imagine. Life has always done this, moving restlessly, reshaping itself endlessly. Even extinction itself may be part of the experiment. Think of it less as an end and more as a reset, a clearing of the board. Each mass extinction removes some strategies and opens space for others. Without the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs, mammals might never have risen to prominence. Without earlier extinctions, reptiles might never have ruled at all. Catastrophe, in this view, is not a failure but a mechanism, a way of testing new directions. The Earth is both laboratory and participant, shaping life through fire and ice, flood and famine, impact and eruption. And so, when we look at ourselves, at humanity, it helps to see us in this broader pattern. We are remarkable, yes. We are capable of art and science, of love and cruelty, of building cities and reaching for the stars. But we are not outside the experiment. We are in it. We are temporary, like every other form before us. Our presence does not mean the experiment has succeeded or ended. It only means that in this moment, this is the form life has taken. What comes next may be stranger still. In that way, fragility and impermanence are not flaws. They are the rules of the trial. Nature's experiments are endless, precisely because none of them last forever. Each has its time, each shapes the world in some way, and then each makes room for the next. When we remember this, it softens the fear of endings. To vanish is not to fail, it is simply to be part of the cycle, part of the long unfolding. So as we drift deeper into this thought, imagine Earth not as a static home but as a vast laboratory in motion. Imagine the oceans as mixing bowls, the mountains as crucibles, the skies as vast domes of experiment. Imagine every creature, every species, as a test of what is possible. And imagine yourself too, not as a spectator outside of it, but as part of the experiment, a participant in the trial of life. What will the results be? What will endure? What will vanish? We cannot know. But the experiment goes on, patiently, endlessly, reshaping the world with every heartbeat of time. 3. Other civilizations before us? When we look around at our cities, our satellites, our oceans filled with ships, our skies stitched with airplanes, it feels almost impossible to imagine that anything like this could have existed before us. We carry an unspoken assumption that civilization is ours alone, that it belongs to humanity and began only in the last 10,000 years. Yet there is a lingering question, one that scientists have sometimes allowed themselves to whisper. What if civilization is not unique to us? What if others rose long before we did, building their own forms of society, leaving traces so faint that we have mistaken them for the work of geology or time? The Earth is not a perfect archivist. Its surface is restless. Continents shift, oceans advance and retreat, mountains rise and crumble. Fossils form only under rare conditions, and even then they do not last forever. Stone can be ground down, buried, or melted back into the mantle. A city, even one built of stone, left alone long enough will disappear. Within a few centuries its walls will collapse, swallowed by vegetation. Within thousands of years, rivers may carve new paths across it. Within millions, the crust will fold it downward into layers of sediment, indistinguishable from the natural world around it. If an advanced society had existed tens of millions of years ago, would we even know? This question has been taken seriously enough to earn a name, the Silurian hypothesis. It was proposed by scientists not as a claim of fact, but as an exploration of how we might detect a civilization that lived and vanished long before humans. Their conclusion was unsettling. We might not find buildings or tools, not after millions of years, but we might find subtler traces, chemical signatures in rocks, unusual isotopes in sediments, patterns in the atmosphere frozen into layers of ice or stone. Our own industrial age has already left such marks. Carbon dioxide levels have spiked sharply in the last 2 centuries. Synthetic chemicals, plastics, and radioactive isotopes have entered the record. If our civilization were to vanish tomorrow, those traces would remain, scattered hints in the geological story. Millions of years from now, they might puzzle whatever eyes looked upon them. And so, if another civilization once existed, perhaps we have already walked past its remnants without realizing it. Of course, when we imagine civilizations before humanity, our minds leap to images from stories and myths. Atlantis is the most famous, an island kingdom described as advanced and powerful, swallowed by the sea. But stories like this exist in many cultures, scattered across continents that had no contact with each other. Tales of drowned cities in India, of sunken lands in the Pacific, of kingdoms beneath the waves in northern Europe. They might be nothing more than metaphors, cultural memories of floods and disasters retold through generations. Or perhaps, in their persistence, they hint at something more, fragments of memory from times when coastlines were different, when rising seas consumed not only land but entire ways of life. Even if we leave myth aside, the natural world itself offers examples of intelligence that remind us civilization may not be uniquely human. Dolphins live in societies with complex communication, teaching, and cooperation. Octopuses use tools and can escape elaborate enclosures, learning rapidly from experience. Crows craft hooks to retrieve food and pass that knowledge to their young. If such intelligence exists now, scattered across the animal kingdom, why could it not have taken root long ago, given enough time and the right conditions? Could there have been a civilization of creatures not human at all, beings with their own technologies, their own forms of art, their own lifeways that left behind only the faintest echoes? It is humbling to realize how easily such a possibility could be erased. Human history itself shows how fragile memory is. Great cities once thrived in Mesopotamia, in the Indus Valley, in the Americas, and many were lost for centuries, hidden beneath soil and jungle. They're only a few thousand years old, and yet they vanished so completely that when rediscovered, they felt like revelations. If such forgetting can happen in the short span of recorded history, what of eras tens of millions of years old, where time itself conspires to erase the evidence? Perhaps the most intriguing part of this speculation is that it reshapes our sense of uniqueness. We often imagine humanity as the first to stand upon this stage, the only actors in the great drama of civilization. But maybe we are simply the latest. Maybe the stage has been filled before, with actors we can no longer name, whose lines have been lost in the folds of time. They may have vanished in catastrophe, or simply faded as circumstances changed, just as countless species have done. And perhaps after us, the stage will be filled again, with new voices, new forms of intelligence, new experiments in what it means to be alive. Even if these thoughts remain speculative, they carry a certain comfort. They remind us that the universe is larger and stranger than we assume, that our place is not the solitary peak of progress but part of a wider, ongoing story. To imagine civilizations before us is not to diminish our own, but to place it within a continuum, a rhythm of rise and fall that has shaped life since its beginning. It humbles us, softens the weight of permanence we so often put on ourselves, and allows us to see humanity as one experiment among many, meaningful not because it is eternal, but because it is here now. So as we let this question linger, were there civilizations before us? We don't need to answer it firmly. The value is not in knowing, but in imagining, in recognizing how fragile memory is, how deep time stretches, how many experiments the Earth may have hosted already. We may never uncover proof. Or perhaps one day, in a cliff face or a layer of stone, we will stumble upon something odd, something that makes us pause and wonder. Until then, the possibility remains like a quiet echo. Maybe we are not the first. Maybe we are simply part of a longer sequence, one more experiment written into the endless laboratory of Earth. 4. Intelligence scattered across life. When people speak of intelligence, they often mean human intelligence. We measure it in language, in tools, in mathematics and memory. We point to cities and satellites, to books and music, and we say, here is proof that we are different, and in many ways, we are. But intelligence is not a single light that burns only in us. It is a fire that flickers in many corners of life, sometimes dim, sometimes bright, sometimes in ways so different from ours that we almost fail to recognize it. If we look closely, we begin to see that the Earth has been experimenting with intelligence for a very long time, scattering it like seeds across the tree of life, watching which ones take root, which ones grow, and which vanish. Consider the birds. Crows and ravens are among the most remarkable examples. They bend twigs into hooks to pull food from crevices. They drop nuts on roads and wait for cars to crack them open, then swoop down during red lights to collect their meal. They remember faces, holding grudges or friendships across years. In one experiment, a crow not only used a tool but combined two tools to create a longer one, solving a problem that required imagination. This is intelligence, though it looks different from ours. It is not written in words or carved into stone, but it exists all the same. Or look at dolphins. Their societies are layered with communication so complex that some researchers compare it to language. They call each other by name, using signature whistles to identify individuals. They pass down hunting techniques through generations, teaching young ones how to chase fish or use sponges to protect their snouts while foraging. They play, they cooperate, they mourn their dead. If civilization is about shared knowledge and culture, then dolphins have already built one beneath the waves. It is not made of stone or metal, but of memory and behavior, transmitted across time. Octopuses are another experiment in intelligence, one of the strangest the Earth has tried. With bodies so different from ours, with no bones, 3 hearts and nervous systems spread throughout their arms, they nonetheless solve puzzles, open jars, and escape from aquariums with an almost mischievous flair. Their intelligence is short-lived, compressed into lifespans of only a few years, but it shines brightly in that time. Some scientists wonder what might have happened if octopuses lived longer lives, if their knowledge could accumulate across decades the way ours does. Would the seas already hold civilizations we have overlooked? Perhaps their experiment was cut short not by lack of imagination, but by the constraints of biology itself. Elephants, too, remind us that intelligence is not singular. They remember waterholes across vast distances. They communicate through infrasound, calls so low that we cannot hear them but that carry for miles. They recognize themselves in mirrors, a rare sign of self-awareness. They mourn, lingering over the bones of their dead, touching them gently with trunks as if recalling. Their intelligence is quieter than ours, slower, more patient but no less real. Even bees, small as they are, display collective intelligence that defies simple explanation. A hive makes decisions not through any single leader, but through the shared behavior of thousands. When searching for a new home, scouts return and dance, conveying direction and distance with tiny movements. Others follow, compare, and eventually the entire hive reaches consensus. This is not human intelligence, but it is intelligence nonetheless, cooperation and communication shaping survival. If we accept all this, then intelligence is not a crown placed upon humanity alone. It is a spectrum, scattered widely, arising again and again in different forms. It is not rare. It is persistent, as though the Earth keeps trying, running experiments in mind and memory, in cooperation and creativity. Sometimes it is brief, like the octopus. Sometimes it endures, like the crow or dolphin, and sometimes it grows into something vast and self-reflective like us. But always it appears, again and again, as though intelligence itself is one of life's favourite experiments. This raises an intriguing possibility. If intelligence emerges so often, what if it had time to rise further before us? What if one of those sparks grew into something greater, into a civilization we can no longer see? If crows or dolphins or elephants had millions of years more than they have had, might they have left traces like ours? Could the Earth have already hosted other experiments in culture, in society, in technology? And if so, might it do so again after us? Perhaps the reason we struggle with these thoughts is because we define intelligence too narrowly. We look for mirrors of ourselves, buildings, tools, writing, and when we do not see them, we dismiss what is there. But what if a civilization left no ruins because it built with materials we would not recognize? What if it encoded memory in song, in migration, in patterns of light or sound rather than stone? What if its traces are all around us, overlooked because they do not match what we expect? The more forms intelligence takes, the more ways civilization itself might be expressed. It is also worth asking whether intelligence must always lead to civilization as we know it. Perhaps other species have developed awareness, creativity and culture, but without the drive to build empires or monuments. Maybe they chose different paths, valuing continuity over expansion, balance over dominance. In that sense, our own civilization may not be the inevitable endpoint of intelligence, but simply one version of it, an experiment among many others. And so, when we look at ourselves, it helps to see not a singular triumph, but a continuation. We are part of a lineage of experiments stretching back across time. The Earth has tried intelligence in many shapes, on land, in the sea, in the air. We are simply the latest expression of that restless creativity. If we vanish one day, the experiment will not end. Intelligence will rise again, perhaps in birds, perhaps in cephalopods, perhaps in something we cannot yet imagine. There is a humility in this perspective. We are extraordinary, yes, but we are not alone in our extraordinariness. We are one branch on a tree that has been sprouting leaves for billions of years. To see ourselves as part of that larger whole does not diminish us. It enriches us. It shows us that intelligence is not a prize but a process, not a singular event but a recurring theme in life's endless trials. So as we drift further into this thought, imagine the Earth not as the stage for one civilization, but as a garden of experiments. Intelligence blossoms in many corners. Some flowers last a season, some endure, some scatter seeds for futures we cannot see. We are one bloom among them, radiant for now, but not eternal. Others have come before, others will come after, and in that continuity, there is comfort. For it means the story is larger than us, that the experiment continues, that life is always reaching, always trying, always finding new ways to think, to feel, to be aware. 5. The ocean's hidden stories. When we gaze at the ocean from the shore, it often looks like a boundary, a horizon that holds its secrets beyond reach. Waves roll in, endless and rhythmic, concealing what lies beneath. For most of human history, the ocean has been more mystery than map. Even now, with satellites orbiting above and submarines plunging into the depths, we have explored only a fraction of what lies below the surface. The ocean is Earth's oldest chamber, a memory bank holding stories longer than mountains, deeper than continents, quieter than forests. And if we imagine humanity as just one of many experiments, the ocean may be the place where other experiments were tried, hidden away, perhaps even flourishing unseen. Life itself began in the water. The first microbes floated in ancient seas, drifting in currents billions of years ago. The first creatures with bones, with eyes, with fins and jaws, all belonged to oceans before land ever knew them. Even today, the ocean remains the most diverse habitat on Earth, filled with more species than we can count, many of them still undiscovered. In that vastness, it is not difficult to imagine entire histories we have overlooked, civilizations that may have risen and fallen beneath the waves, leaving only whispers in coral reefs or in myths told on the shore. Consider how little evidence it would take for such a story to vanish. A city built on land might leave ruins for millennia, but one beneath the sea would disappear quickly. Currents erode, sediment buries, salt corrodes. Within centuries, even our strongest metals decay. Within thousands of years, only vague outlines might remain, and within millions, they would be erased entirely. The ocean swallows, transforms, and conceals. If an intelligent species had thrived in its depths long before us, building with materials we do not recognize or leaving signals in languages we cannot decode, would we know? Or would we simply swim past their bones, mistaking them for chance formations? Legends suggest we have long suspected there is more to the ocean than what we see. The story of Atlantis is only the most famous, but it is not alone. Cultures across the world have told of lost cities drowned by the sea, of kingdoms beneath the waves, of beings who came from the depths with knowledge or warnings. In Japan, stories speak of palace realms at the bottom of the sea, where time moves differently. In Celtic traditions, there are islands that vanish beneath the tide, reappearing only once in a great while. Indigenous peoples of the Pacific tell of lands swallowed by rising waters, homes of ancestors who now live beneath the surface. These may be metaphors, memories of floods and migrations. Or they may be fragments of something older, echoes of experiments that ended long before ours began. Even without myths, the ocean itself feels like a place where civilization could take another form. Think of dolphins, whose societies are as complex as some human ones, layered with communication, cooperation, and culture. Think of whales, whose songs span miles, echoing across vast distances like underwater radio signals. Think of octopuses, clever and curious, their intelligence expressed in sudden flashes of problem-solving. These creatures already show us that the sea is fertile ground for mind and memory. If given more time, if spared the resets of extinction or the limits of biology, could one of them have gone further? Could there have been a chapter of Earth's story where the ocean held a civilization of its own? Even now, the deep sea holds mysteries that feel almost otherworldly. Entire ecosystems thrive without sunlight, clustered around hydrothermal vents where water heated by the planet's core gushes into the abyss. Tube worms longer than a person, shrimp with light-sensing backs, and microbes that feed on chemicals instead of photosynthesis all survive there, in a darkness that should feel hostile but instead blooms with life. These are not just curiosities, they are proof that life is more adaptable than we ever assumed. If thriving communities can exist around vents in total darkness, what else might have been possible in the ages before us? Perhaps civilizations need not resemble ours at all. Perhaps they were not builders of stone but weavers of bioluminescent cities, sculptors of coral, singers of songs that pulse through water instead of air. And then there are the scars of the ocean floor itself. Vast ridges stretch for thousands of miles, trenches sink deeper than Mount Everest is tall, and seamounts rise like forgotten mountains. These landscapes are as dramatic as any on land, yet hidden from view. Occasionally, scientists stumble upon anomalies, geometric structures that look suspiciously deliberate, patterns in rock that resemble roads or walls. Most can be explained by natural processes, but each one fuels the imagination. Could some of these features be remnants, not accidents? Could we be mistaking the traces of an experiment for the randomness of geology? It is not only the past that whispers of such possibilities, but also the present. New species are discovered in the ocean every year, sometimes in shallow reefs, sometimes in the deepest trenches. Some glow with light of their own, some communicate with clicks, pulses, or dances we barely understand. Some show behaviors that feel startlingly close to culture. The ocean is still alive with experiments, still testing forms and strategies, still shaping futures we cannot yet foresee. In that sense, it is not only a memory of what may have been, but also a laboratory for what may yet come. When we imagine the ocean this way, as a place of hidden stories, it changes how we see ourselves. Humanity feels less like the single result of Earth's creativity, and more like one chapter among many, one experiment among countless others that have swum, sung, and shimmered in the sea. Our cities may be loud and bright, but perhaps they are not the only ones the Earth has ever known. Perhaps beneath the waves others once built their own kinds of worlds, vanished now, waiting only in myth and in imagination. And if that is so, then we might also wonder what comes next. If humanity were to disappear, the ocean would remain, vast and patient. New experiments would unfold. Perhaps dolphins or octopuses would take another step. Perhaps something entirely new, born from the deep, would rise to awareness. The ocean would continue, as it always has, holding secrets, shaping futures, whispering stories that we may never fully hear. To sit with this thought is to feel both small and deeply connected. Small, because our time is brief and our knowledge incomplete. Connected, because we are part of something larger, the endless experiments of a planet that has always been trying, always been creating, always been testing what life can be. The ocean is not just water. It is memory, possibility, and mystery. And in its hidden stories, we may find hints that humanity is not the only experiment, not the first and not the last. 6. Underground possibilities. The surface of the Earth feels like the natural home of civilization. We measure time by the rising and setting of the sun, we orient ourselves by horizons, and we build our structures beneath the open sky. But beneath our feet lies a world we rarely think about, a vast labyrinth of stone, soil, and hidden chambers that stretches downward far beyond what most of us can picture. The Earth is layered, deep, and mysterious, and the underground is both a place of silence and a place of imagination. What if, long before humanity, the Earth ran one of its experiments not on the surface at all, but beneath it? What if civilization itself once grew underground, sheltered from the chaos above? Caves have always drawn human beings with a strange pull. They are not like forests or rivers, which invite exploration through light and openness. They are thresholds into shadow, doorways into hidden realms. Our ancestors painted the walls of caves with animals and symbols tens of thousands of years ago, not in the entrances where light might reach, but deep inside, where only flickering torches revealed the shapes. These were not simply shelters from weather, they were sacred spaces, echoes of something older than history. Perhaps even then, people felt that the underground was not just absence but presence, a place that could hold memory, ritual, and meaning. If we imagine an early civilization choosing to live underground, the idea begins to make a kind of sense. The surface of the ancient Earth was unpredictable. Storms, predators, shifting climates, and constant exposure made survival difficult. Underground, conditions are steadier, temperatures remain more stable. Rock walls provide protection from weather and enemies. Water seeps through cracks, collecting in pools. Mushrooms and fungi grow without sunlight, feeding on decay. With fire for light and warmth, and with knowledge passed from generation to generation, an entire society might have chosen to turn inward rather than outward. There are precedents even in recorded history. In Cappadocia, in what is now Turkey, archaeologists have uncovered vast underground cities carved into soft volcanic stone. Some could hold tens of thousands of people with ventilation shafts, storage rooms, stables, and wells. These were not mere hiding places. They were designed for long-term living, protection from war, climate, or danger. In the deserts of Iran, ancient communities built elaborate underground channels to carry water and keep crops alive, living partly beneath the surface to escape the burning heat. Even in modern times, there are towns where people live in underground homes to keep cool in relentless Sunday. The underground, far from being impossible, has always been an option when the surface grew hostile. But what if this strategy was not just occasional? What if it was the beginning? Picture a society that never returned to the surface, that built its homes, rituals, and myths entirely beneath stone. To such a people, the sun might be a rumour, a dangerous force told of in stories, too bright and too hot to endure. Their world would be measured not by horizons but by corridors, not by dawn and dusk but by routines of light and dark created with fire or bioluminescence. Their children would grow up never seeing the sky, their sense of space shaped by walls and echoes. Their music would carry in strange ways, reverberating through caverns, filling the air with overlapping harmonies. Shadows would dance on walls, turning ritual into performance, story into moving image long before screens were ever imagined. If such a civilization ever existed, how would we know? Evidence underground is fragile in its own way. Tunnels collapse, chambers flood. Over time, geological processes seal and erase. Surface ruins can remain visible, uncovered by wind or weather, but underground structures are easily buried forever, indistinguishable from natural formations. A collapsed cavern looks to us like a natural cave-in, not a fallen hall. Stone walls smoothed by hands look like natural erosion. Even if such a society once thrived, its traces may have been hidden so completely that we walk above them every day, unaware of the lives that once filled the spaces below. The persistence of myths about hidden worlds suggests this idea is not entirely foreign to us. Cultures across the world have told of subterranean realms. In Tibetan tradition, there are stories of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom beneath mountains. In Hindu mythology, the Patala realms stretch downward, filled with beings distinct from those on the surface. In Western stories, legends of Agartha and the Hollow Earth echo similar ideas, that beneath the ground lies another world, another society. Perhaps these stories are symbolic, or perhaps they are dim echoes of memory, retold so many times that their details blurred into myth. Even if such a civilization never existed, the possibility invites us to reimagine intelligence and survival. What if the Earth's experiments in civilization have not always been surface-dwelling? What if life, in its endless creativity, once turned inward, building culture in silence rather than under the sky? Such a society would have shaped itself differently. Its architecture would be adapted to rock and narrow spaces. Its stories would reflect confinement and the allure of unknown heights. Its technologies might focus less on expansion outward and more on endurance, stability, and control of environment. Instead of towers rising into the air, there might have been chambers sinking deeper into stone. It is even possible that such experiments are not only in the past but in the present. The deep biosphere of Earth, layers of rock miles beneath the surface, teems with microbial life. Scientists have discovered bacteria thriving in complete darkness, feeding on minerals, heat, and chemical reactions. Some of these ecosystems are older than humanity, perhaps older than complex life itself. If microbes can flourish in such places, what prevents the possibility that more complex organisms once did too, or still do? The underground could harbour secrets we have yet to uncover. Entire ecosystems, perhaps even the remnants of forgotten experiments in intelligence. And if we widen our view to the cosmos, the underground may be more than a curiosity. On other planets and moons, surfaces are often hostile, bombarded by radiation, frozen or scorched. But underground, shielded from extremes, life could endure. Perhaps civilizations, not only on Earth but elsewhere, have chosen this path. Perhaps the underground is not a fringe idea but a common one, a recurring solution in the great experiment of life. When we think of ourselves in this way, as surface dwellers on a planet that might once have held deeper societies, it humbles us. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, our monuments all feel like declarations of permanence, but they are just another version of living, no more inevitable than a community beneath the ground. Civilization may not be one story but many, each tried in its time. Some flourish, some vanish, some leave traces, some remain hidden. Humanity may be the surface experiment. Others may have been underground, lost to time, but still part of the same great rhythm. So as we let this thought settle, we might picture ourselves walking across the ground, each step pressing down on layers of stone that hold more than just rock. Perhaps they hold forgotten chambers, echoes of voices, fragments of stories from experiments that ended long ago. We may never find them. We may never know. But to imagine them is to widen our sense of possibility, to recognize that civilization is not bound to the sky or to sunlight. It may take many forms, some visible, some hidden, some lost forever. And if humanity is just one experiment, then perhaps the underground holds the memory of another, waiting in silence beneath our feet. 7. Experiments beyond Earth. When we look up at the night sky, it can feel like staring into an ocean of silence. Stars scatter across the blackness, each one distant, ancient, and unreachable. To us, they seem like ornaments more than neighbours, shining but too far to touch. Yet each of those points is a sun, and around many of them may circle planets. Some of those planets may hold oceans, mountains, skies, and even life. If Earth is a laboratory of endless experiments, perhaps it is not the only one. Perhaps the universe itself is filled with experiments, each star system a new attempt, each world a new possibility. Humanity, then, would not be unique at all, but part of a much larger pattern of trials being run across the cosmos. For as long as we have wondered about the stars, we have asked whether others are out there. The question seems natural, almost inevitable. If life appeared here, why not elsewhere? If intelligence grew here, why not in other places? And yet, despite our listening, our searching, our signals sent into the void, we have heard nothing in return. The silence feels strange, unsettling. Scientists have given this mystery a name, the Great Silence, or the Fermi Paradox. The paradox lies in this. The universe is vast. Billions of stars older than our sun exist, and yet we see no signs of civilizations. If experiments are being run across the stars, why have we not noticed their results? One possibility is that civilizations, like species, are fragile. Perhaps the experiment of intelligence is common, but rarely lasts long. Civilizations may rise, flourish for a time, and then vanish, wiped away by catastrophes, by self-destruction, or by simple change. If so, then the silence is not evidence of absence but of impermanence. We may be hearing nothing because most experiments end before they can reach across the stars. And in that light, humanity may be one more trial, in a sequence that has unfolded countless times. Each civilization, a brief flame flickering and then gone. Another possibility is that the experiments are still ongoing but hidden. Civilizations may exist but choose not to reveal themselves, perhaps to avoid interference, perhaps because their ways of communication are different from ours. Maybe they are not sending signals through radio waves at all, but through methods we cannot yet detect, signals encoded in neutrinos, in gravitational waves, in patterns of starlight. To us the sky looks empty, but to them It may be alive with messages we cannot yet understand. If that is so, then the silence is not emptiness but camouflage, a veil across experiments we have not yet learned to see. It is also possible that the universe itself is the experiment, with conditions set in such a way that life arises again and again, each time different, each time unique. The laws of physics allow stars to burn steadily, planets to form, water to flow, carbon to bind into complex shapes. These are not accidents but rules, like the framework of a great laboratory. Within those rules, life is given the chance to appear. Sometimes it thrives, sometimes it fails, sometimes it evolves into intelligence. The experiment may not be about permanence, but about variation, about seeing what arises when conditions are tried in 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000 different ways. If we think of the universe this way, Earth feels less like a miracle and more like one of many test sites. Our intelligence, our civilization, our moment in time is part of a broader tapestry of trials. Somewhere else, perhaps on a planet circling a distant red star, another species may be asking the same questions, wondering if they too are alone. Perhaps their civilization is just beginning, or perhaps it has already lasted far longer than ours. Or perhaps it has already ended, leaving behind traces we will never know, signals that faded before our ears were ready to listen. And yet, even in silence, there are clues. The discovery of thousands of exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant stars, reminds us that planets are not rare. They are everywhere, in every direction we look. Some are gas giants, others rocky like Earth. Some lie within their star's habitable zone, where liquid water could flow. Already, astronomers have detected atmospheres, clouds, and hints of chemical signatures that suggest strange active processes. Each of these worlds is a potential experiment. Each could hold life in forms we cannot imagine. Perhaps intelligence itself is not the goal of the experiment, but simply one branch among many. Life may take forms that do not think as we do, that do not build or write or wonder. It may flourish as forests of alien plants, as seas of living clouds, as colonies of organisms that blur the line between individual and collective. From our perspective, these might not seem like civilizations at all, but from the perspective of the universe, they are just as valid, just as meaningful. They are different outcomes of the same ongoing trials. And then there is the most speculative possibility that the experiments are not random at all, but guided, that civilizations, once they reach a certain level, begin seeding other worlds, placing life where it did not exist before, nudging conditions, planting the seeds of intelligence. If so, then humanity may itself be the result of such an act, the outcome of an experiment started not by accident but by intention. We may not yet know by whom or why, but the possibility lingers. Perhaps we were placed here as part of something larger, a chain of experiments stretching across galaxies. Whether random or intentional, natural or designed, the thought remains the same. We are part of something vast. The universe is not empty but full of possibility. Each world is a trial, each civilization, each species is a step in an unfolding story. Some experiments last longer than others. Some vanish without trace. Some ask questions, as we do now. All are part of the same great rhythm. So when we look up at the stars, instead of seeing only silence, we might imagine an invisible chorus. Civilizations rising and falling, some already gone, some yet to begin, each part of the same experiment of existence. We cannot hear them now, but perhaps the universe is alive with their echoes, waiting for us to listen differently. And whether we hear them or not, the fact that we ask the question shows that we too are part of the experiment. We are not outside it, not above it, but within it, unfolding like all the others. The stars remind us that the story is larger than us. Earth is not the only laboratory. Humanity is not the only trial. Across the cosmos, experiments continue, silent but steady, written into the very laws of nature. To imagine this is not to diminish our place, but to deepen it. We are one spark in a sea of sparks, one experiment in an ocean of experiments. And that, in its own way, is a kind of comfort that the universe has always been creating, always been trying, always been testing what life can be. 8. Were we placed here? It is one thing to imagine humanity as an experiment of nature, shaped slowly by the blind hands of evolution and time. It is another to ask the more unsettling question: What if we were not only the product of chance, but deliberately placed here? The thought feels bold, almost too large to hold, and yet it has followed humanity for as long as we have been able to look at the stars. Across myths, religions, and speculative theories, the idea repeats in different costumes, that we are not merely the outcome of accidents, but the result of intention. That someone or something put us here, perhaps to watch, perhaps to test, perhaps for reasons we cannot yet guess. When we trace our story back through science, it unfolds with its own quiet logic. Life arose in the oceans billions of years ago, simple cells drifting in salt water. Over eons, these cells became more complex, branching into countless forms. Fish crawled onto land, reptiles became mammals, apes evolved into humans. The steps are long, patient, and consistent with the mechanisms of natural selection. But within that long, steady climb, there are leaps that stand out, moments when change happens so rapidly, so dramatically, that it feels almost like a curtain was pulled back. The appearance of symbolic thought in humans, sometimes called the cognitive revolution, is one of those leaps. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors used simple stone tools, lived in small groups, hunted and gathered. Then, within a span of time small on the geological scale, art appeared. Language flourished. Agriculture rose. Cities formed. It is as though something shifted, and the mind of humanity bloomed all at once. For some, this leap is perfectly explainable. Diet, climate, cooperation, and chance all may have converged. For others, it is the kind of moment that invites speculation. Was something introduced, nudged, or placed? Theories of placement range from the ancient stories of gods creating humanity to modern speculations about advanced civilizations seeding life on young planets. The scientific name for such an idea is panspermia, the possibility that life did not begin here, but was seeded here, carried on asteroids or comets, perhaps even guided by intelligence. If true, then Earth itself may have been prepared as a stage, set in motion to see what might emerge. The myths we inherit often echo this idea in poetic form. The Sumerians told of beings descending from the skies to shape and guide early humanity. In West African traditions, the Dogon people spoke of knowledge given by visitors from the star Sirius. In indigenous stories across the Americas, there are accounts of sky beings, messengers who brought wisdom or warning. Even the Bible frames humanity not as an accident, but as placed in a garden, deliberately created. These stories differ in detail, but they share a core suggestion that humanity did not simply stumble into existence, but was positioned here, like a seed planted in fertile soil. Of course, science urges caution. Stories are not proof. Speculation does not replace evidence. But sometimes the convergence of story and puzzle invites us to wonder. Why did our minds leap forward so suddenly? Why do we feel at once perfectly adapted to this planet and strangely out of place within it? Our brains are unusually large for our bodies, demanding enormous amounts of energy. We struggle with childbirth because our heads are so big compared to the bodies that bear them. We are vulnerable in ways many animals are not, lacking fur, lacking claws, slow to run, weak to cold. And yet, with fire, with tools, with thought, we thrive. It is almost as if we were overbuilt, equipped with more mental capacity than survival alone demanded. Was that a happy accident? Or was it the signature of a placement, a gift, or perhaps an intention? Even the conditions of Earth itself can feel tuned. The planet rests in the so-called Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold. Water flows freely, the atmosphere is breathable. The magnetic field shields us from cosmic radiation. Our moon stabilizes the planet's tilt, keeping seasons steady. All of these factors are explainable through physics and probability, and yet together they feel balanced, almost prepared. To skeptics, this is coincidence. To others, it is suspiciously convenient. It feels like arrangement, like placement. If we were placed, then the questions grow even larger. Who placed us? And why? Were we meant to be a project, a trial, an experiment in consciousness? Were we meant to carry forward something from elsewhere, to preserve a lineage of intelligence? Or are we part of a test we cannot yet understand, one of many experiments being run across different worlds, each with its own outcomes? The unsettling part is that we cannot know. Placement, if true, hides itself perfectly within the processes of evolution and geology. It leaves only hints, only impressions. There is another possibility, stranger still, that we placed ourselves. If time is more flexible than we currently understand, if future humans learn to travel backward, could they have seeded their own origins, ensuring their existence by placing life in the past? The idea borders on paradox, but it carries a strange symmetry. It would mean humanity is both the result and the cause, both the experiment and the experimenter. Regardless of which path of thought we take, the idea of placement reshapes our perspective. If we are placed, then we are not an accident. But that does not necessarily mean we are the center of the story. It may mean only that we are one of many placements, one of many trials. Perhaps civilizations across the galaxy are each planted like seeds in different soils, left to grow in their own ways, to see what emerges. Some wither, some flourish, some destroy themselves, some learn to endure. We may be no more and no less than one such attempt, a seed growing in Earth's garden, tended or left alone by forces we cannot yet name. Whether we were placed or not, the thought invites humility. If we are intentional, then we are part of a larger design. If we are accidental, then we are part of a larger process. In either case, we are not outside the story but within it. Placement reminds us that our presence is precious, fragile, and temporary. It encourages us to ask what kind of experiment we want to be, what kind of traces we want to leave for those who come after. So as this idea lingers, imagine standing beneath the night sky, looking up at the stars. Imagine that you are not here by chance but by design, not simply one creature among many, but part of something larger, placed with care into this time and this place. Whether by natural laws or by unseen hands, whether by accident or by intention, here you are. The question is not only how you arrived, but what you will do with the moment you have been given. And perhaps, in that sense, placement is not just a question of origins, but a question of purpose. 9. Earth as a test field. There is a quiet thought that has followed humanity like a shadow for as long as we have been able to look around and wonder. What if the Earth itself is not just a planet, not just a random gathering of rock and water circling an ordinary star, but a stage prepared for something more? What if this world is not simply the backdrop of our story, but the very reason we are here? In this view, the Earth becomes more than a home. It becomes a test field, a place designed or arranged to see what happens when life is given the right conditions. The more we examine the details of our planet, the easier it is to let this thought linger. Earth rests in what scientists call the habitable zone, that narrow band around a star where water can exist as liquid. Too close to the sun, and oceans boil. Too far, and they freeze. We orbit at just the right distance, a sweet spot where rivers flow, rain falls, and seas cradle life. Our atmosphere is thick enough to hold warmth, but thin enough to let sunlight through. Our magnetic field shields us from cosmic radiation. The tilt of our axis creates seasons without plunging us into extremes. Even the moon plays a role, its gravity stabilizing our spin so that our climate remains steady enough for life to thrive. All of these pieces together feel improbably balanced, almost suspiciously so. Was it luck? Or was it arrangement, as though the laboratory was set up in advance, waiting for the experiment to begin? Once life appeared, the experiment began unfolding in earnest. It was not a straight line, but a sprawling set of trials. For billions of years, single-celled organisms dominated, multiplying and evolving in the oceans. Then came multicellular life, a sudden bloom of diversity in what we now call the Cambrian explosion. From there, Earth tried countless strategies: armored fish, giant ferns, towering reptiles, delicate mammals. Each experiment ran for millions of years, shaping ecosystems, testing resilience, adapting to changing conditions. Most ended, leaving fossils as quiet records. But each failure cleared space for something new. In that way, extinction itself became part of the test, a reset button, allowing the experiment to begin again under different rules. Think of the great extinctions. The asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs was not just destruction, it was transformation. With the giants gone, mammals flourished, leading eventually to us. Without that reset, we would not be here. Other extinctions followed similar patterns. They wiped the board clean, not to end the experiment, but to refresh it, to see what else might emerge. Each catastrophe was both an end and a beginning, both a tragedy and an opportunity. If Earth is a test field, then the resets are as important as the continuities, shaping the direction of life in ways that random survival alone cannot explain. And then, at last, came humanity, creatures who not only survive but reflect. We build stories, we ask questions, we wonder whether life has meaning. We send machines into space to look back at our own planet, as if trying to see the test from outside. Perhaps this is the latest stage of the experiment, to see what happens when life becomes aware of itself. Do we destroy ourselves with the very tools we invent, or do we find balance? Do we learn compassion, or do we fall into cruelty? Do we endure, or do we vanish like those before us? In this sense, the experiment is not only biological but moral, cultural, and spiritual. The Earth is not only testing survival, it may be testing choice. Even the ordinary rhythms of human life take on new meaning under this thought. The laughter of children, the grief of loss, the quiet work of farming or building, all of it may be part of the data. How do creatures respond to joy, to scarcity, to abundance, to suffering? Each decision, each interaction, each rise and fall of civilization may be part of the test. Not just the grand events of history, but the everyday ways we live and love may be the very essence of what is being observed. If this sounds eerie, it also carries a kind of comfort. For if Earth is a test field, then none of it is meaningless. Our struggles, our failures, our moments of kindness, our collapses and rebuildings, they are not random noise. They are part of something larger, part of a story in which nothing is wasted. Even extinction, even suffering, becomes woven into the fabric of the test, not erased, but transformed into new beginnings. Of course, we cannot know for certain. To see the Earth as a test field is a perspective, not a proof. It is an invitation to imagine, to wonder whether our world has always been more than it seems. Perhaps everything truly is coincidence, an improbable chain of chance events leading to us. But even then, the idea of testing remains. For evolution itself is a kind of trial, a ceaseless experimentation in form and function running across billions of years. Whether by design or by chance, Earth is and has always been a place of experiments. The laboratory is real, even if no one set it up. So, as we sit with this thought, imagine the Earth as a field at dawn stretching wide, the air cool and still. Imagine seeds planted, some sprouting, some failing, some blooming into strange and wonderful forms. Imagine storms passing through, clearing the field, resetting it, allowing new seeds to grow. Imagine that among those seeds is humanity, growing for now, fragile and uncertain, but part of the same pattern as all the rest. And then imagine that the test is not about the outcome at all, but about the unfolding, the process, the watching of life in its endless creativity. To think of Earth this way is to soften the boundaries of our pride. We are not separate from the story, not above it. We are inside it, woven into the same experiment as trilobites, dinosaurs, whales, and forests. We are temporary, like all the others, but in our temporariness lies our beauty. For the test field is not about permanence, it is about possibility. And in this moment, in this fragile chapter, we are one of Earth's possibilities. 10. Cosmic patterns. If Earth feels like a test field, then perhaps the test does not stop here. Maybe it stretches outward into the cosmos itself, woven into the quiet fabric of stars and planets, unfolding in ways we are only just beginning to sense. The night sky is not random, it is patterned. Galaxies swirl in spirals, stars gather in clusters, planets circle in rhythms so steady we can predict their positions for centuries to come. Beneath the vastness, there is order, and within that order we might find signs of experiments larger than Earth alone. When astronomers discovered the first interstellar visitor to pass through our solar system, a long, thin object tumbling silently between the planets, they named it Oumuamua. It appeared suddenly, moved with strange acceleration, and then was gone, leaving behind more questions than answers. Not long after, another interstellar traveller was detected, a comet called 2I, divided by Borisov, racing through space on its own long journey. And now, others such as 3I, Atlas, remind us that objects do not simply belong to one solar system. They wander, they pass through, they connect distant regions of space like seeds carried on the wind. To us, they are rocks and ice, but to imagination, they can feel like messages, like fragments of a larger pattern, reminding us that our solar system is not alone. Patterns are everywhere if we let ourselves notice them. Stars form in nurseries where gas and dust swirl together, ignited into brilliance by gravity's patient pull. They burn for millions or billions of years, then collapse into dwarfs, giants, or black holes. Planets circle, some barren, some fertile, some shrouded in atmospheres we cannot yet penetrate. Across all of this, there is a sense of repetition, of trials run again and again, different ingredients, different outcomes, but the same rules guiding them. If Earth's experiment is one among many, then the cosmos itself may be the laboratory, and its patterns the signature of endless testing. The great silence, the mystery of why we have not yet found other civilizations, can itself be seen as part of a pattern. Civilizations may rise, flourish briefly, and then vanish, erased by time before they can leave lasting marks. Or perhaps they are still here, hidden in ways we cannot yet perceive, communicating through channels invisible to us, like a conversation just outside the range of our hearing. If so, then perhaps the silence is less about emptiness and more about scale. We are small, our tools young, our reach short. From where we stand, the pattern is incomplete, but that does not mean it is absent. In myths, too, patterns emerge. Cultures separated by oceans and centuries speak of beings from the sky, of cycles of destruction and renewal, of hidden knowledge placed into the world as though seeded. The specifics differ, but the rhythm feels familiar, as though humanity has always sensed that we are part of something larger. These stories may not be literal, but they capture a truth in poetic form that life seems to follow arcs, that civilizations rise and fall in repeating shapes, that the cosmos itself feels like it is arranged in echoes. Science also hints at patterns in unexpected places. The elements that form our bodies, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, iron, were forged in the hearts of stars, scattered into space by explosions long before Earth formed. We are, as Carl Sagan once said, made of star stuff. But more than that, we are made of recycled patterns. The same atoms that shaped the first creatures in the ocean are now in us. The same molecules that formed ancient forests are in our breath. Life is not a one-time event, but a continuity, a pattern repeating with variation carried across ages. Perhaps intelligence itself is one of those patterns, rising again and again wherever conditions allow, like a melody played on different instruments across the galaxy. Even extinction fits into this idea. It feels random and brutal when viewed closely, but across time it resembles a rhythm: catastrophe, renewal, growth, collapse. The details differ, but the pattern remains. It is almost as though the cosmos is conducting a symphony, each planet an instrument, each civilization a note, each extinction a pause before the next phrase. To us, the pauses feel like endings. To the cosmos, they may be simply part of the song. When we look at human history itself, we see smaller versions of these patterns. Civilizations rise, build, flourish, and then decline. Mesopotamia, Egypt, Rome, the Mayans, each followed arcs of growth and collapse. In their time, they must have felt permanent, unshakable. Yet to us, they are ruins, stories, echoes. And we too are following a pattern, whether we realize it or not. Our technologies grow, our reach expands, our complexity increases, and yet the same fragility remains. We are part of the same experiment, the same rhythm, repeating in new forms. To imagine Earth as a test field within a cosmic pattern is to feel both small and significant. Small because we are not the center, significant because we are included. We are one thread in the tapestry, one variation in the pattern, one experiment among many. Whether we succeed or fail, endure or vanish, the pattern continues. And perhaps that is the real meaning: not to last forever, but to participate in the unfolding, to contribute our note to the larger music. It is easy to feel unease at this thought. We want permanence, certainty, the assurance that humanity is special and lasting. But perhaps there is comfort in impermanence too. A pattern does not depend on a single note. It depends on the whole arrangement, the repetition, the variations. We are part of something so much larger than ourselves, and in that belonging lies a kind of peace. The stars shine not to reassure us, but to remind us that we are within the same order, the same rules, the same unfolding experiment as everything else. So as you look at the night sky, you might imagine it less as an empty silence and more as a field of patterns, each star a trial, each planet a possibility. Each interstellar visitor a reminder that the experiments connect, that the laboratory is shared, and within that vastness, here we are, a fragile civilization wandering about its place. Whether the pattern is natural or designed, random or intentional, does not change its beauty. The beauty is in belonging to it, in knowing that our brief spark is part of the larger light. One variation in the endless experiment of the cosmos. 11. Temporary phases. There is a natural human tendency to imagine ourselves as the final act of Earth's story. We speak as though everything that came before us, the microbes, the forests, the dinosaurs, was leading to this moment, to us. We like to think of ourselves as the destination, the culmination, the reason the planet has spent billions of years shaping oceans and mountains. Yet when we step back and look at the broader sweep of history, it becomes difficult to hold that belief. Life has always moved in phases, each one powerful in its own time, each one temporary. To think that humanity will be any different is to forget that we too are part of the same cycle, the same rhythm of rise and fall. Consider the dinosaurs. For over 160 million years, they walked, flew, swam, and thrived. By comparison, humans have been here for only a few 100,000 years. To them, we would have been unimaginable. Their world was complete without us, filled with its own dramas, its own struggles, its own experiments in survival. They might have seemed eternal, destined to rule forever, but they were not. Their phase ended abruptly, and when it did, the world began again with new experiments. Even further back, before the dinosaurs, trilobites scuttled across the seafloor for nearly 270 million years. They too seemed eternal in their time, filling oceans across the globe. They survived countless shifts in climate, waves of extinction, and yet eventually their phase too ended. Forests of giant ferns once covered the earth, towering over dragonflies with wings as wide as a hawk's. That age passed as well. Again and again, the planet has hosted phases that felt permanent but were not. In this light, humanity begins to look less like the final result, and more like one more phase in a sequence of many. We are remarkable, yes, but we are not outside the rules. Like every phase before us, we will have our time, and then we will give way to what comes next. This is not a pessimistic view, though it may feel so at first. It is simply the way life works, a rhythm that has shaped the planet since its beginning. Our transience does not lessen our meaning. If anything, it deepens it. To know that our time is temporary is to recognize how precious it is. Phases are not only measured in species, but also in civilizations. When we look at human history itself, we see the same pattern repeating in smaller cycles. Great empires rose and believed themselves unshakable. Mesopotamia, the cradle of writing and law, flourished for millennia before its cities crumbled. Ancient Egypt built monuments that still stand, yet the culture that built them passed into memory. Greece shaped philosophy, Rome built roads and laws, the Mayans charted the skies. The empires of China and Africa rose and fell, all believed, in their time, that their ways of life were permanent. All were mistaken. Each was a phase, each ended, each left behind traces, but none lasted forever. Our own modern civilization, with its satellites and skyscrapers, is still young. Barely a few hundred years of industrial growth have reshaped the world, and already we talk of permanence, of colonizing planets, of leaving Earth behind. Yet from the perspective of deep time, we are still in our infancy. Our technologies may last for centuries, perhaps millennia, but not forever. Even if we spread to other worlds, the rhythm remains. Nothing lasts eternally. Civilizations are phases, just as species are phases, just as ecosystems are phases. There is a strange kind of comfort in this. If we are temporary, then our failures are not final. If we collapse, life will not end. The experiment will continue with new participants. Perhaps dolphins will take new steps into intelligence. Perhaps birds will flourish in unexpected ways. Perhaps something entirely new, born from forests or oceans, will rise to awareness. Humanity's phase may be brilliant, but it is not the only one. The story continues, with or without us. When we look at ourselves as a phase, humility follows. It reminds us not to cling too tightly to the illusion of permanence. It reminds us that what we build is important, but not absolute. It invites us to shift our focus from eternal legacy to present meaning. What matters is not whether humanity lasts forever, it will not, but how we live while we are here. What kind of phase will we be? What will we leave behind for the ones who come after, whoever they are? Phases also overlap. Even now, while we live our phase, others are running in parallel. Whales, with their vast songs, are in their own phase of being. Crows, elephants, octopuses, all are experimenting with forms of intelligence that may lead somewhere new. Forests, reefs, tundras, deserts, each is its own unfolding. Humanity is not the only experiment on Earth, only the loudest one. When our phase ends, the others will continue, adapting, transforming, carrying the rhythm forward. There is another way to see this idea, not as loss but as music. A symphony is not one note played forever, but a sequence of movements. Each is temporary, each arises and fades, but together they create something larger. Humanity is one movement in Earth's music. Dinosaurs were another. Trilobites, forests, glaciers, all had their verses. The music continues, and while our part may be brief compared to the whole, it adds to the richness. It is not the permanence of a single note that matters, but the beauty of the whole composition. Sometimes, when people imagine the end of humanity, they feel dread, but perhaps we can instead feel curiosity. What comes after us? What shape will the next phase take? Will it be gentle or fierce, familiar or strange? We cannot know, but we can trust that it will come, as it always has. Earth does not stop. Life does not stop. Experiments continue. Phases follow phases, each temporary, each meaningful. And so, we might soften our grip on the idea that we are the destination. Instead, we can imagine ourselves as participants in a flow, contributors to a story that has no final page. To be a phase is not to be unimportant. It is to be part of something larger, something ongoing, something endless. Our phase is now, and that is enough. So let us sit with this thought. Humanity is not the end of the story, but one chapter among many, one verse in the music, one phase in the unfolding experiment of Earth. Temporary, yes. Fragile, yes. But also luminous, meaningful, and precious. To know that we are temporary is to know that we belong to a rhythm far older than us, and far greater. And that belonging, gentle and vast, is its own kind of comfort. 12. Signs in stone and ice. The Earth is an archivist, though not always a careful one. It keeps memories in layers of stone, in frozen sheets of ice, in the quiet chemistry of sediments at the bottom of seas. These records are not written in words but in patterns. Fossils pressed into limestone, trapped bubbles of ancient air, shifts in isotopes that reveal the rise and fall of oceans or forests. And if humanity is just one of many experiments, then perhaps these layers hold more than the story of natural change. Perhaps, hidden in stone and ice, there are faint signs of civilizations older than we imagine, traces of experiments that came and went long before we arrived. We are used to thinking of archaeology in human terms. We dig up pottery, ruined temples, fragments of tools. But those are fragile things. Given enough time, even the strongest stone erodes, even the hardest metal corrodes. A city left alone is quickly swallowed. Within a century, plants and weather soften its edges. Within 1,000 years, only broken fragments remain. Within 1,000,000, it is gone. If we search for civilizations that existed tens of millions of years ago, we cannot expect to find intact walls or statues. We must look deeper, into the Earth's memory itself, for the subtler marks that civilizations leave behind. One such mark might be chemistry. In the last 2 centuries, our own civilization has changed the atmosphere in ways that will be recorded for millennia. Carbon dioxide has spiked to levels unseen for millions of years. Plastics, though fragile on the surface, may leave traces in sediments as unusual polymers. Nuclear activity has already spread radioactive isotopes across the planet, tiny but measurable, that will linger long after we are gone. These are not artifacts in the usual sense, but signatures, patterns so unlikely to occur naturally that they point to something deliberate. If another civilization once burned fuels, built industries, or experimented with energy on a large scale, perhaps their signatures too are buried in stone and ice, disguised as natural anomalies but waiting for us to notice. Glaciers hold similar secrets. ice cores drilled from Antarctica or Greenland reveal bubbles of air from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Within them, scientists can measure ancient levels of carbon, methane, even pollen carried by winds. They show the rise and fall of forests, the shifts of climate, the breath of the planet itself across ages. If a civilization had once altered the atmosphere in dramatic ways, the ice would have recorded it. Already we see our own fingerprints in the most recent layers, a sudden departure from the long rhythm of natural cycles. If others came before us, perhaps their breath is still there, caught in the frozen memory of ice, waiting quietly in the deep. There are also geological oddities, layers in stone that resist easy explanation. Some show sudden spikes in metals like iridium or platinum, often linked to asteroid impacts but not always. Others reveal abrupt warming events or unusual isotopic ratios that puzzle scientists. Most are explained through natural processes, but not all explanations feel complete. If civilizations are temporary, rising and falling in deep time, their traces would not look like ruins. They would look like anomalies, blips in the steady record, subtle scars that only hint at a larger story. The ocean floor, too, carries secrets. Sediments settle year by year, building a library that extends back millions of years. Within those layers are shells of plankton, volcanic ash, chemical residues from the air and rivers above. When drilled, these cores reveal climate shifts, extinctions, blooms of life. If a civilization had once thrived along ancient coastlines, altering rivers, reshaping landscapes, even building on shores now long drowned, the sediments might still carry the faint chemical fingerprints of their presence. Not buildings, not statues, but changes in the balance of carbon, nitrogen, or metals that do not quite fit the rhythm of the natural world. Even mass extinctions themselves might be signs. Some are clearly linked to asteroids or volcanoes. But what if others were caused by something else? Something less obvious? What if a civilization once pushed ecosystems to collapse, as we are doing now? The extinction might look natural in hindsight, but buried within it could be evidence of artificial cause, unusual pollutants, rapid habitat changes, anomalies too quick to be explained by geology alone. To us, it would look like a sudden disaster. To them, it might have been the end of their phase, their experiment concluded. It is important to acknowledge that these are speculations, possibilities rather than proofs. We do not yet have evidence of civilizations before ours. But to search for signs in stone and ice is to open ourselves to the possibility to ask not only what is there, but what might have been erased. The Earth is not a perfect recorder. It erases as much as it preserves. The shifting of plates swallows whole landscapes. Volcanoes bury records in fire. Glaciers grind continents into rubble. The deeper we look, the more we realize how easily history disappears. And yet, some traces remain. Enough, perhaps, to one day surprise us. There is humility in this search. We are used to thinking of ourselves as the first, but what if we are not? What if our presence is just one line in a record far older and more complex than we know? To imagine this does not make us smaller. It makes us part of something larger, a chain of experiments unfolding across time. Each leaves a trace, sometimes faint, sometimes bold, written into stone, ice, and ocean. Ours will be there too, waiting for whoever comes after us to read. And perhaps that is the most humbling thought of all. One day, another species or another civilization may look back at the record we have left. They may drill into ice and see the sudden spike of carbon from our industries. They may cut into stone and find radioactive isotopes scattered across layers. They may puzzle over our plastics, our metals, our brief but dramatic fingerprint on the planet. To them, we may be a mystery, a phase they cannot fully reconstruct, a story mostly erased but not entirely lost. They may wonder who we were, why we rose, why we vanished, just as we wonder now if others came before. So the Earth holds its signs, quietly, patiently, in stone and ice. Some we have read, some we have not yet recognized, some we may never find. But the possibility remains that we are not the first, that we are not alone in the long sequence of experiments, that others too have left their traces, faint but enduring, waiting in the deep archives of the planet. And in time, we too will join them, our presence etched into the memory of the Earth, fragile yet indelible, a sign that we too were part of the great unfolding. 13. Experiments that failed. When we think of life on Earth, our minds tend to focus on the survivors, the species that made it through the gauntlet of time to reach the present. We tell the story of evolution as though it were a ladder, each rung leading upward toward us. But the truth is different. The story of life is not a ladder, but a vast, tangled tree, with branches that sprout, flourish, and then wither. For every species alive today, thousands more have come and gone, most vanishing without leaving much of a trace. The Earth has been filled with experiments that failed. Not failed in the sense of mistakes, but failed in the sense of impermanence. They had their time, their moment of expression, and then they ended, swept away by change. Some of these failed experiments lasted for millions of years, others barely lasted at all. Consider the trilobites, one of the earliest great experiments in complex life. They emerged more than 500 million years ago, diversified into thousands of forms, and ruled the seas for nearly 270 million years. To them, it must have felt eternal. And yet, their experiment ended during the mass extinction of the Permian, when nearly all life in the ocean was erased. Trilobites are gone, their once thriving experiment reduced to fossils that now rest in stone. Other experiments were stranger, less familiar. During the Cambrian explosion, life tried forms that seem almost alien to us. Creatures with multiple eyes on stalks, armoured bodies shaped like discs, bizarre appendages used for feeding. Some of these designs endured and gave rise to modern lineages. Others disappeared quickly, evolutionary trials that did not continue. Their fossils are like sketches abandoned on the page, half-finished ideas that life tested and set aside. To us, they look strange, even grotesque, but they remind us that nature has always been creative, always experimenting, not only with what works but also with what does not. Even in more recent times, failed experiments abound. Giant ground sloths once roamed the Americas, larger than modern elephants, feeding on trees with claws the size of swords. Saber-toothed cats prowled the plains with teeth so long and fragile that they could break in the struggle for prey. Enormous birds, flightless and fierce, dominated certain continents for a while. These creatures thrived in their time, shaping ecosystems, ruling as apex predators or massive grazers. But they too vanished, undone by climate shifts, human hunting, or the slow roll of change. Their experiments were powerful but temporary. It is not only species that fail. Ecosystems themselves can collapse. Coral reefs, rainforests and grasslands are experiments in balance, each relying on countless interactions between plants, animals, climate, and soil. When balance breaks, the whole system falters. Across deep time, entire ecosystems have risen and fallen. Ancient reefs made not of coral but of sponges once filled the seas, only to disappear in extinction events. Coal forests of the Carboniferous era, filled with giant ferns and dragonflies, collapsed as the climate shifted, leaving behind only the fossil fuel we burn today. Each ecosystem was an experiment in complexity, beautiful while it lasted but none permanent. And then there are the experiments that may have brushed against intelligence itself. The fossil record hints at possibilities we may never fully understand. Certain dinosaurs showed signs of larger brains, more social behaviour, even complex hunting strategies. Some scientists have speculated that, given more time, they might have evolved into something more, creatures capable of culture or even technology. But their phase ended suddenly, cut short by an asteroid. If intelligence was budding there, that experiment failed too, leaving us to wonder what might have been. Even humanity has run its share of failed experiments. Whole cultures have risen and vanished, leaving only fragments behind. The Indus Valley civilization, with its sophisticated cities and drainage systems, collapsed mysteriously, its script still undeciphered. The Mayan Empire, with its towering pyramids and complex astronomy, declined, leaving ruins swallowed by jungle. Countless smaller societies flourished in their time, each with its art, its rituals, its stories, and then ended. They were not failures in the sense of worthlessness. They were experiments in human possibility, part of our collective story. Yet each shows us the fragility of civilization, how easily it can falter under pressure from climate, conflict, or resource strain. When we think about experiments that failed, we may feel a kind of sadness, as though loss diminishes the beauty of what once was. But perhaps failure is not the right word at all. Perhaps these experiments were simply temporary, part of the endless flow of life's creativity. Each phase added something to the earth, even if it did not last. Trilobites left fossils that taught us about the ancient seas. Saber-toothed cats left bones that remind us of the richness of the past. Even vanished civilizations left ruins that spark wonder and humility. Failure, in this sense, is not an end but a contribution, another piece in the grand mosaic. And perhaps humanity, too, will one day be seen as such an experiment. Our technologies, our art, our brief but dramatic impact on the planet may leave traces for future beings to puzzle over. If we vanish, our phase may be remembered or rediscovered, not as a failure but as one attempt among many. The Earth does not measure success by permanence. It measures by participation, by the unfolding of possibilities. To exist at all, even briefly, is to have contributed to the great experiment. There is also a lesson here for us. In the present, many of our own experiments are ongoing. Our ways of living, our economies, our technologies are trials in real time. Some may endure. Others may collapse. What matters is not that they last forever, but that we learn from them, that they shape the course of what comes after. To see ourselves as part of a sequence of experiments softens the fear of failure. It allows us to live with curiosity rather than with the desperate need for permanence. So, let us imagine the Earth not as a museum of eternal species, but as a workshop. Each life form, each ecosystem, each civilization is a prototype, an attempt, a sketch. Some are refined, some abandoned, some transformed into something new. The failures are as important as the successes, for they guide the path forward, showing what can and cannot endure. Humanity is part of that workshop, part of that flow. Whether we last for millennia or vanish sooner, our time is part of the story, part of the experiment. And perhaps the beauty of it all is this: nothing is truly lost. The trilobites are gone, but their forms still rest in stone. The dinosaurs are gone, but birds carry their lineage into the skies. Vanished forests fuel our fires. Lost civilizations inspire our imaginations. Each failed experiment leaves something behind, a trace, a gift, a lesson. And we too will leave ours, whatever shape it takes, for others to find in the deep archives of the Earth. 14. Experiments that continue. The story of life on Earth is not finished, nor is it frozen in the past. Even now, experiments are unfolding all around us, running quietly in forests, in oceans, in skies, in the edges of human society where innovation and tradition meet. We sometimes think of the great experiments of evolution as belonging to the past, creatures long extinct, civilizations long collapsed. But the truth is that life is still experimenting, still testing forms, behaviors, and possibilities. The laboratory of Earth has not closed its doors. It is as alive and restless today as it has ever been. One of the most visible experiments is intelligence itself. For centuries, humans claimed this trait as uniquely our own, yet science continues to show us how untrue that is. Dolphins communicate with intricate whistles, passing names from one generation to the next. Crows not only use tools but teach their young how to make them, preserving knowledge across lifetimes. Elephants remember water holes for decades, mourn their dead, and display empathy in ways that mirror our own. Even octopuses, so alien in form, continue to surprise us with feats of problem-solving and adaptability. These are not failed experiments, nor are they static ones. They are ongoing trials, each exploring intelligence in different forms. Some may never progress beyond where they are now, but others may be laying the groundwork for futures we cannot imagine. Consider birds. After the extinction of the dinosaurs, they inherited the skies and flourished. Many species show remarkable problem-solving skills, complex songs and cooperative behaviors. Parrots live for decades, learning words and concepts with astonishing precision. Corvids, ravens, magpies, and crows display the ability to plan for the future, a trait once thought uniquely human. Their experiment is far from over. In fact, in many ways, they seem to be growing more sophisticated as they adapt to human environments. Crows in cities, for instance, have learned to use traffic lights to crack nuts, to recognize human faces, to thrive where other species struggle. If humanity were to vanish, might birds take the next step, building cultures that deepen over thousands of years? It is not impossible. Their experiment continues. The ocean, too, is alive with experiments. Whales sing in patterns that change over time, evolving like human music. Some researchers believe these songs spread across entire oceans, carried from group to group in waves of cultural exchange. Dolphins create cooperative hunting strategies, sometimes joining forces with humans in fishing communities. Fish form schools that move like single organisms, exploring the limits of collective intelligence. Even corals, often overlooked, build vast reef systems that function almost like superorganisms, with countless species working together in balance. These are experiments in cooperation, in communication, in resilience. They are still being tested, still unfolding, still searching for what works. On land, insects provide some of the most astonishing examples. Ant colonies behave as though they are single creatures, millions of individuals forming one mind. They build complex structures, farm fungi, wage wars, and make decisions as a collective. Bees decide on new hive locations through dances, reaching consensus without central control. These systems of distributed intelligence are still being refined, still adapting to new conditions. In their quiet ways, ants and bees may be running experiments in social organization that are as sophisticated, in their own right, as any human government. Even humanity is still experimenting. Our civilizations are not fixed but constantly shifting, trying new forms of governance, technology, and culture. Agriculture was once a radical experiment, replacing the wandering life of hunters and gatherers with settled communities. Writing was another, storing memory outside the mind, allowing knowledge to accumulate. The Industrial Revolution was an experiment with energy, with all its consequences. Today, we are running new trials with digital technology, with artificial intelligence, with genetic modification. Each is a test of what is possible, what is sustainable, what leads to flourishing and what leads to collapse. Some of these experiments may endure, others may prove fragile, but all are part of the same process, the same restless creativity that has always driven life forward. And beyond biology, the planet itself continues its experiments. Volcanoes reshape landscapes, creating new islands where life must learn to adapt. Rivers carve new paths, forcing species to relocate or perish. Climate shifts test resilience, challenging ecosystems to change or be erased. Even extinction itself continues. Species vanish every day, victims of pressures they cannot withstand. Yet, extinction is never final. It clears space for new experiments, new possibilities. Just as the fall of dinosaurs opened the path for mammals, the changes happening now may set the stage for the next dominant forms of life, whether human or not. The most humbling part of this perspective is that we cannot see the outcomes while we are inside them. To us, these ongoing experiments may seem ordinary, even invisible. We walk past ants without noticing their empires. We hear bird songs without realizing they may be cultural transmissions. We swim beside dolphins without grasping the depth of their social lives. Our own experiments, our technologies, our cultures feel monumental, but in the scale of deep time, they are only one more trial, one more test among countless others. This way of seeing reframes failure and success. A species that lasts a few million years before vanishing has not failed. It has contributed to the story, tested a strategy, added to the diversity of life's experiments. A civilization that rises and falls within centuries is not meaningless. It is part of the rhythm, part of the laboratory's ongoing work. Even our own fragile presence is meaningful, not because it will last forever, but because it is happening now, shaping the Earth in ways that will echo into the future. If we imagine the Earth as a great library, each experiment is a book. Some are short stories, read quickly and forgotten. Some are long epics, spanning millions of years. Some are fragments, unfinished or lost. Together they form the library's fullness. The books still being written by dolphins, crows, ants, and by us are part of that collection. We do not yet know how long they will be, or how they will end, but they are no less valuable for being incomplete. So, as we reflect on experiments that continue, perhaps the most important thought is this. Life is not finished. The story is still unfolding. The laboratory is still open. Intelligence is still budding in many corners. Culture is still emerging in unexpected places. Even now, while we live our phase, other phases are beginning, their outcomes uncertain. We may not see their results, but we can imagine them, and in imagining them we can recognize our shared place in the great flow. To be alive now is to witness experiments in progress, to walk among them without always realizing. Our role is not only to participate but also to notice, to honor the creativity of life that surrounds us. And perhaps, in seeing this, we can soften our grip on permanence and embrace the truth. Life is always experimenting, always moving, always trying new forms. Humanity is one of those forms, remarkable in its own way, but not the only one. We are part of a much larger pattern, a chorus of experiments that continues, patiently, endlessly, across the face of the earth. 15. Experiments yet to come. It is easy to believe that the world will end with us, that humanity is the last great story Earth will tell. We imagine ourselves as the pinnacle, the conclusion, the reason all of history has been unfolding. Yet if we look at the record of life, this belief grows thin. Every dominant species has believed its reign permanent, and every reign has ended. Dinosaurs ruled for longer than we can truly comprehend, and they are gone. Trilobites filled the seas for hundreds of millions of years, and they are gone. Forests rose and fell, glaciers came and went, whole ecosystems blossomed and vanished. We are part of this same rhythm. And when our phase ends, as it must, the Earth will not stop. The experiments will continue. What comes after us may be stranger than anything we can imagine. Perhaps intelligence will rise again in forms already familiar to us. Dolphins may take the next step, extending their cooperative cultures into something even deeper. Birds may grow more sophisticated in communication, developing languages and traditions that grow richer across centuries. Elephants may evolve new strategies for survival, their memory and empathy forming the roots of something like civilization. These possibilities are not fantasies, but extensions of what we already see in their behaviors today. Their experiments are in progress, and given the space we leave behind, they may blossom into something new. It is also possible that entirely new lineages will rise, creatures we barely notice now, or that have not yet appeared. Insects may evolve into new forms of collective intelligence, surpassing anything we can conceive. The ocean may birth new experiments, organisms that thrive in the deep or around hydrothermal vents, building societies in places we cannot see. Even the smallest creatures, microbes, may one day combine into new complexities, repeating the great leap that led from single cells to multicellular beings billions of years ago. The future is not written, but it is inevitable that life will keep trying, keep experimenting. The Earth itself will shape what comes next. Climate is changing, and it will continue to change. Seas may rise, forests may shift, deserts may spread. These changes will be brutal for some species, but they will create opportunities for others. Life has always adapted to new conditions, filling new niches, trying new strategies. When humans vanish or transform into something unrecognizable, the world that follows will be fertile ground for new experiments. Perhaps the future will not be ruled by large creatures at all, but by smaller, faster, more adaptable ones. Perhaps swarms, colonies, or networks will define intelligence more than individuals. And then there is the possibility that the next experiments will not be entirely natural. Humanity itself may plant the seeds of what comes after. Our technologies, if they outlast us, could become the foundation of something new. Artificial intelligence, robotic systems, or genetic modifications may persist beyond our own phase, evolving independently in ways we cannot predict. Machines may not need us to continue. Once set in motion, they may become experiments in their own right, adapting and changing long after our voices are silent. Or perhaps life will merge with technology, forming hybrids that are neither entirely biological nor entirely mechanical, a new branch of evolution born of our experiments but continuing without us. There is also the possibility that what comes next may not even begin here. Our probes, our satellites, the traces of our presence scattered beyond Earth may seed other worlds, however unintentionally. A stray microbe clinging to a spacecraft could find new soil on a distant moon. Fragments of our machines may drift between stars, reminders, or even foundations for something else. We may vanish here but leave behind echoes elsewhere, experiments continuing in ways we never foresaw. In that sense, we are already spreading the conditions for futures we cannot control. The beauty of this perspective is that it frees us from the illusion of finality. We are not the last. We are not the end. We are one of many phases in an unbroken sequence of experiments that stretches forward as far as it stretches back. The Earth is patient. It has endured extinctions, upheavals, collisions, and ice ages. Each time, life has returned, different but alive, trying again. Our presence is dramatic, but it is not absolute. When we are gone, the laboratory will remain open. The next experiments will take their place, as they always have. Some might find this thought unsettling, but it can also be comforting. It means that the story does not depend entirely on us. Even if we fail, even if we vanish, the great experiment continues. Life will not stop. Intelligence may rise again. Civilization may take forms stranger and more beautiful than anything we know. Our role is important, but it is not everything. We are participants, not authors of the whole. We add to the story, but we do not close the book, and perhaps that is the truest way to see our place. We are not the destination, but a bridge. Our brief phase is a crossing point between what came before and what will come after. The lessons of our successes and failures will remain in the earth, written in stone and ice, carried forward in the chemistry of air and soil. Future experiments will inherit those lessons, whether they know it or not. In that way, we are already shaping what comes next, already influencing experiments we will never see. So imagine, for a moment, standing far in the future, long after humanity is gone. The Earth is still alive, filled with strange new creatures, new songs in the forests, new shapes in the oceans. Perhaps intelligence has risen again, in forms unrecognizable to us. Perhaps civilizations flourish, not built of stone and metal, but of coral, feathers, or song. The world is different, but it is no less beautiful. And in its beauty there is continuity, the assurance that life never ends its experiments, that the story always continues. To know this is to see ourselves differently. We are not fragile accidents doomed to fade into silence. We are part of a process larger than ourselves, part of an experiment that stretches across time. Our role is to live our phase fully, to contribute our verse to the song, to leave behind traces that enrich the experiments yet to come. We are not the end of the story, we are the middle, and that, in its own way, is enough. 16. Hidden observers. There is an old and quiet suspicion in the human mind, one that lingers in stories, myths, and philosophies across cultures. It is the feeling that we are not entirely alone, that our lives are not only unfolding but being observed. Sometimes this suspicion takes the form of gods watching from above, weighing our deeds. Sometimes it appears in the idea of ancestors who linger as unseen presences, guiding or judging us. In more modern times, it emerges as speculation about extraterrestrials or higher intelligences, monitoring Earth as if it were a great experiment. Whatever shape it takes, the core of the thought is the same. What if our world is not simply existing but being watched? What if humanity itself is part of a study, a trial, a story whose audience remains invisible to us? The first question is why this idea feels so natural. Perhaps it is because human beings are storytellers by nature, and stories rarely unfold without someone listening. A play is written for an audience, even if that audience is unseen. To imagine our lives without observers feels almost incomplete. We sense patterns in the world around us, and where there are patterns, we assume intention. The rising and setting of the sun, the turn of seasons, the rhythm of life and death, these can feel like the structure of a story, and where there is structure, we imagine someone watching it unfold. If Earth is a test field, as some of our earlier thoughts have suggested, then it is not unreasonable to imagine testers, hidden observers who set the stage and then step back, letting the experiment run. Perhaps they are advanced civilizations, far older than we can imagine, capable of seeding life and monitoring its progress across eons. Perhaps they are not civilizations at all, but something more abstract consciousness woven into the fabric of the cosmos, observing itself through the eyes of its creations. Or perhaps the hidden observers are not external but internal, the deeper parts of our own awareness that watch ourselves live, silent and mysterious even to us. The idea of hidden observers appears again and again in myth. In Norse tradition, the gods watched humanity's actions, intervening only at times of great consequence. In Greek mythology, the gods observed, tested, and sometimes tricked humans, curious about their choices. In indigenous traditions across the world, spirits and ancestors are often seen as watching, not to punish but to witness, to hold continuity between generations. Even in Eastern philosophies, there is the sense that reality itself may be observed by a deeper, eternal awareness, of which we are only passing expressions. These stories differ in detail but all suggest that being observed is part of the human condition. Science, too, entertains this idea in surprising ways. The simulation hypothesis proposes that our reality may be the creation of an advanced intelligence, a program running in a vast computer, with us as unaware participants. If so, then there are indeed observers, designers who set the parameters and watch what happens. To us, the laws of physics are fixed, unchanging, but to them, they may be settings, adjustable variables in a grand experiment. Whether or not this hypothesis is true, it reflects the same intuition, that existence may not be unobserved, that behind the veil of what we see there may be eyes, conscious and curious. Even without speculation about gods or simulations, it is possible that observers exist in the form of civilizations beyond Earth. If intelligence has arisen elsewhere in the universe, perhaps some of it is far older than we are, old enough to master technologies we cannot yet imagine. For them, observing us might be effortless. They could watch from a distance, sending instruments or signals, waiting to see what choices we make. To us, the silence of the universe feels empty, but perhaps it is the silence of an audience not yet ready to reveal itself. Perhaps we are like actors on a stage, performing without knowing who sits in the darkened seats beyond the lights. There is also the more unsettling possibility that the observers are not benevolent. What if we are not being watched with curiosity, but with indifference, or worse, with cold intent? Some thinkers have imagined scenarios where civilizations monitor younger worlds, not out of interest but out of caution, ensuring they do not grow too disruptive. Others suggest the observers might be gardeners of a sort, planting seeds of life and pruning them when they grow in unwanted directions. To us, this would look like extinctions, catastrophes, sudden resets. We might interpret these as natural disasters, while they could be adjustments, corrections made by hidden hands. The Earth's history of sudden upheavals, asteroid strikes, volcanic winters, unexplained die-offs could be seen not only as accidents but as interventions. And yet, it is just as possible that the hidden observers, if they exist, are not external beings at all. Perhaps the universe itself is the observer. Physics suggests that observation is not passive, that the act of noticing influences what is observed. At the quantum level, particles behave differently when measured, as though the universe responds to being watched. If this is true, then awareness and observation may be fundamental to reality itself. We may not need hidden beings to explain the feeling of being observed. It may be that existence itself is conscious in some deep, mysterious way, and that our awareness is simply one strand in a vast web of observing and being observed. If we sit with this idea quietly, we begin to notice how much of our lives already feel like participation in a test. We struggle, we learn, we make choices, and we wonder about meaning. These are not only biological necessities but reflective experiences, as though someone or something were interested in how we respond. How do we treat each other when resources are scarce? How do we behave when we discover power? Do we destroy or preserve? Do we isolate or cooperate? These are not only survival questions, they are ethical, cultural, even spiritual questions. They are the kinds of questions an observer might ask if they wanted to see what life would do when given freedom and awareness. Whether or not hidden observers exist may never be something we can prove, but to imagine them shifts the way we see ourselves. It softens arrogance. It invites humility. It makes us careful, as though our choices matter not only for us but for the unseen eyes that may be watching. And even if the observers are only imagined, the effect is real. To live as though we are being witnessed is to live more mindfully, more thoughtfully, more fully aware that our lives are part of a larger unfolding. So perhaps the question is not whether observers exist, but how we choose to act if they do. Do we live with the dignity of beings aware of being seen? Do we treat the earth, each other, and ourselves as though our actions have meaning beyond the moment? Whether or not someone is watching, the perspective changes us. It makes life feel less like an accident and more like a story, part of a test, part of an experiment that matters. And maybe that is the quiet truth hidden in the idea of observers. It is not about surveillance or control. It is about the recognition that life is not meaningless, that what we do matters, that even if the only observer is the earth itself, or the memory written into stone and ice, or the awareness within us, we are still being witnessed. And to be witnessed is to be real, to be part of something larger, to belong. 17. Connections across time. When we think of experiments, we often imagine them as separate trials, each one contained, each one beginning and ending on its own. But what if the experiments of life and civilization are not isolated? What if they are connected, stretching across time, carrying lessons forward in ways we may not fully understand? The Earth itself suggests this possibility. Each phase of life has prepared the ground for the next, leaving behind not only fossils but conditions, legacies, and patterns that make future experiments possible. In this way, nothing truly ends. Everything carries forward, each experiment linked to those that follow. Consider the earliest life in the oceans, tiny microbes drifting in ancient seas billions of years ago. Alone they seem simple, but they transformed the Earth. Through photosynthesis, they released oxygen, changing the very chemistry of the atmosphere. What began as a microscopic process reshaped the entire planet, allowing for the rise of complex life. Their experiment did not simply vanish when they declined. It became the foundation upon which all later life was built. The forests, the animals, the humans breathing today are all connected to that ancient trial. The same pattern appears again and again. When plants spread onto land, they altered soil and climate, creating habitats for insects and animals to follow. When trees grew taller, they shaped ecosystems that made room for birds and mammals. When dinosaurs thrived, they left behind birds, who now carry their lineage into the skies. Each phase left something behind, a connection, a gift to the future. Even extinctions play this role. The asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs did not only destroy, it cleared space for mammals, and eventually for us. Destruction and creation are not separate. They are connected in a cycle that carries experiments forward across time. Civilizations show the same rhythm. Ancient cultures left traces that shaped those who came after. Mesopotamia gave us writing and law. Egypt left architecture and symbolism that influenced countless societies. Greece offered philosophy, mathematics, and the seeds of democracy. Rome spread systems of governance and infrastructure. China, India, Africa, the Americas all contributed legacies that ripple into the present. Even collapsed civilizations are not lost. Their knowledge, their art, their experiments in social order often survive in fragments, absorbed into the cultures that followed. In this way, each civilization is not isolated but connected to others, across time and distance, part of a continuous thread of human experimentation. Sometimes the connections are invisible until we look closely. A tool refined in one age becomes the foundation for a technology in another. A story told in one culture reappears in another, reshaped but recognizable. Even myths, though often dismissed as fiction, may carry memories of earlier experiments, floods, fires, lost lands, encounters with mysterious beings. These myths link past and present in subtle ways, reminding us that human imagination itself is a thread that stretches back as far as we can remember, carrying insights forward even when material traces are gone. But what if the connections extend even further, beyond Earth itself? If life has arisen elsewhere in the cosmos, then perhaps civilizations across the galaxy are also part of a larger network of experiments. Some may be older, some younger, some already vanished. Perhaps their legacies echo not in ruins but in signals, waves of information crossing the stars waiting to be noticed. So far, we have heard only silence. But silence itself may be part of the pattern, the space between notes in a symphony too vast for us to yet perceive. One day, perhaps, we will realize that we are already connected, already part of a chorus that spans not only time but space. Connections across time need not be literal to be real. They can also be symbolic, resonances that shape how we understand ourselves. When we study fossils, we connect to creatures long gone, feeling their presence in stone. When we read ancient texts, we connect to minds that lived thousands of years ago, hearing their voices across millennia. When we look at the stars, we connect to a past so distant it feels like another universe. The light we see tonight left its source long before we were born. These connections remind us that time is not a wall but a thread, that the past, present, and future are woven together in ways we only glimpse. There is also the possibility that connection itself is the point of the experiment. Perhaps life is not about isolated trials, but about building continuity, carrying awareness forward through different forms. If so, then humanity's role may be less about permanence and more about transmission. We may not last forever, but we may leave behind knowledge, art, or technology that seeds what comes next. Even if our species vanishes, our influence will ripple onward, shaping the experiments that follow. In this way, we are already connected to futures we will never see, just as we are connected to pasts we can only imagine. The idea of connections across time also changes how we see failure. No experiment truly fails if it leaves something behind. Trilobites may be gone, but their fossils taught us about ancient seas. The Mayan civilization may have collapsed, but their calendars and astronomy still inspire awe. Our own civilization may one day vanish, but our traces will remain in stone, in ice, in orbit, even drifting between stars. Each phase contributes something, no matter how brief. The experiment is not measured by its length, but by the connections it creates, the ways it feeds into the larger story. To live with this perspective is to feel continuity, a sense of belonging not only to the present but to the entire sweep of life. We are connected to ancient microbes who breathed oxygen into the air we now inhale. We are connected to the mammals who survived the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs. We are connected to the first humans who lit fires in caves, painted animals on stone, told stories around flickering flames. And we are connected to whatever comes after us, whoever will walk the earth when we are gone. Our presence now is one thread in this vast weaving, one note in the song, one experiment among many, linked across time. So perhaps the greatest comfort is this: nothing is wasted. Every life, every civilization, every experiment contributes to the flow. Even when it ends, it leaves something behind, a trace, a connection, a possibility for what follows. Humanity is part of this chain, not alone, not final, but connected. To see ourselves this way is to accept both our fragility and our significance. Fragile, because we will pass. Significant, because we belong to the endless network of experiments, carrying forward the story of life, adding our voice to the chorus that stretches across time. 18. Toward a greater pattern. When we step back far enough, the details of history begin to blur, and patterns emerge. Species rise and fall, civilizations appear and vanish, planets spin and change, but all of it seems to move with a rhythm, a quiet order beneath the seeming chaos. Perhaps the countless experiments of life, scattered across time and space, are not random at all. Perhaps they are part of a greater pattern, one we have not yet learned to see in full. Humanity, then, may not be an isolated experiment, but one thread woven into a design that stretches far beyond us. Patterns are everywhere if we learn to notice them. Consider the spiral, one of the most ancient and recurring shapes in nature. Galaxies twist into spirals, hurricanes spin in the same form, seashells curl into spirals as they grow. Even the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower follows the same mathematical rhythm, a spiral guided by the ratio we call the golden mean. Life, weather, and stars all share this pattern, as though the universe prefers certain forms, repeating them at different scales. Is this coincidence? Or is it the whisper of a greater design, a reminder that the experiments of life are not separate but connected, bound by underlying rules? Another recurring pattern is the cycle of rise, fall, and renewal. Extinctions reset the planet, only for life to bloom again in new ways. Civilizations collapse, only for new societies to rise from their ruins. Even our own daily lives reflect this cycle. We wake, live, sleep, and begin again. It is as if the universe favors cycles over permanence, experiments that flow into one another rather than standing alone. If this is true, then our existence is not an isolated event, but part of a repeating rhythm, one movement in a symphony that stretches across time. Perhaps the greater pattern is not only biological but also conscious. Intelligence appears in many forms: the problem-solving of crows, the songs of whales, the empathy of elephants, the cleverness of octopuses, and of course, the reflective awareness of humans. Each seems like a separate trial, but perhaps together they are threads of a larger pattern. The universe testing different ways of thinking, different ways of being aware. If so, then humanity is not the single result but one variation among many. And perhaps, in time, these variations will converge, forming a larger expression of awareness than any single species could achieve alone. The idea of convergence is not foreign to us. We already see it in evolution, where different lineages arrive at similar solutions. Wings evolved independently in insects, birds, and bats. Eyes appeared again and again across unrelated species. Even intelligence itself seems to arise repeatedly in mammals, birds, and cephalopods. Nature tries different paths, but often arrives at similar results, guided by hidden rules. If this is true, then perhaps the countless experiments of civilization across the cosmos are also converging, testing different paths toward a greater destination. We cannot yet see the full design, but we may be part of it, contributing our variation to the pattern. Some thinkers have speculated that the greater pattern might be the emergence of collective intelligence, not within a species but across many. Just as ants form colonies that behave like a single organism, perhaps the universe is weaving together the awareness of countless civilizations spread across time and space into a larger whole. From our perspective, the experiment seems separate. From the perspective of the cosmos, they may be strands of the same fabric, each necessary, each contributing. Humanity's wars, loves, songs, and questions may not be meaningless after all, but part of a larger tapestry that cannot yet be seen from within. If this is true, then even our failures are not wasted. Civilizations that collapse contribute lessons to the pattern, shaping the direction of those that follow. Species that vanish make space for new forms. Even extinction, which feels like erasure, may be transformation, the clearing of old experiments so new ones can emerge. In this view, the greater pattern is not fragile. It is resilient, adaptive, unending. Individual experiments may fail, but the pattern continues, carrying forward the essence of all that came before. This perspective also softens the fear of impermanence. If humanity ends, that does not mean the pattern ends. It means only that our thread has been woven in, our contribution made. What comes after us will carry something of us forward, just as we carry the legacies of those who came before. We are not alone in the pattern, not final, but part of a flow far larger than ourselves. That belonging may be the true meaning of our existence, not permanence, but participation. It is tempting to ask what the greater pattern is moving toward, what final picture it will reveal. But perhaps that is the wrong question. Patterns are beautiful not because they reach an endpoint, but because they repeat, vary, and evolve. A spiral does not end. It continues outward or inward, always unfolding. A cycle does not conclude. It turns again and again. The greater pattern may not be aiming at a conclusion at all. It may be the unfolding itself, the endless experimentation, the continual weaving of new forms into the whole. Still, it is worth imagining. What if the greater pattern is awareness becoming more complete, life learning to see itself more clearly through countless eyes? What if the pattern is compassion, slowly widening as species and civilizations learn the value of connection? What if the pattern is creativity, the universe discovering its own possibilities through art, music, story, and invention? Whatever the answer, to be part of it is enough. To live, to wonder, to contribute, even briefly, is to participate in the greater pattern. So perhaps when we look at the stars, we should not only ask whether we are alone, we should ask what larger story we are helping to tell, what greater design we are part of. We may not see the full pattern in our lifetimes, or even in the lifetime of our species, but we can trust that it exists, because the evidence is all around us, in spirals, in cycles, in convergences, in the way experiments never truly end but flow into one another. To imagine ourselves as part of a greater pattern is to feel both humility and belonging. Humility, because we are not the center. Belonging, because we are included. Our presence, fleeting though it may be, contributes to the endless unfolding. We are not the final word, but we are part of the sentence, part of the song, part of the pattern that stretches beyond what we can see. And that, quietly and beautifully, is enough. 19. Humanity's legacy. When we think of legacy, we often picture monuments, books, or inventions, things we believe will outlast us. We imagine that our cities, our technologies, and our ideas will stand as proof that we were here. Yet the truth is that most of what we build will eventually crumble. Stone erodes, metal rusts, paper decays, data fades. Even the strongest structures will one day return to dust. If humanity is just one of many experiments, then our legacy may not be the permanence of what we leave behind, but the influence of our presence, the ripples we send into the larger flow of life. Some of those ripples are tangible. In the Earth's layers, our civilization has already left a clear mark. The sudden spike of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the traces of plastics in sediments, and the radioactive isotopes scattered by nuclear activity. These are all fingerprints that will endure long after we are gone. Future beings, whether human or not, will find these clues in stone and ice. They may not understand the full story, but they will know that something happened here, something powerful enough to alter the chemistry of the planet. That will be part of our legacy, written not in words, but in the geology of the Earth itself. Other ripples are cultural. Our art, our music, our stories carry pieces of us that may endure in unexpected ways. Even if our civilizations collapse, fragments of culture often survive. Ancient myths, carved into tablets, still speak to us thousands of years later. Cave paintings, tens of thousands of years old, still whisper the presence of hands that reached across time. If we vanish, some part of our art may remain, etched into stone, buried in ruins, carried forward in ways we cannot predict. And even if no one remembers the specifics, the influence of our culture may live on in how it shaped what came after, just as forgotten ancestors shaped us. There is also a biological legacy. We have carried species with us across the globe, reshaping ecosystems wherever we go. Some animals, like dogs and cats, are inseparably linked to us now, their futures tied to ours. Crops we have cultivated may continue to grow long after we are gone, spreading seeds across continents. Other species may evolve in response to the changes we created, carrying our influence in their very genes. Just as ancient forests gave rise to the coal we now burn, humanity's presence will echo in the life forms that survive us. Our technologies too may linger. Satellites circle Earth, some destined to fall and burn, others perhaps to drift for ages in silent orbit. Probes launched into the solar system carry messages, golden records etched with music, languages and images of life on Earth. These are small, fragile things compared to the vastness of space, but they are part of our legacy nonetheless. Even if Earth forgets us, a distant traveller might one day find these artifacts, strange and lonely evidence that we once wondered about our place in the universe. Yet legacy is not only what remains physically, it is also what we pass forward in possibility. Every invention, every story, every idea adds to the greater pattern of life's experiments. Even if humanity vanishes, the lessons of our phase may influence what comes next. The rise and fall of civilizations may teach future beings about resilience. Our art may inspire. Our mistakes may warn. Our compassion may guide. Legacy is not permanence, but influence ripples carried forward into futures we cannot see. There is humility in recognizing how little of us will endure in material form. Our skyscrapers will crumble. Our digital records will fade. Even our monuments, like the pyramids or Mount Rushmore, will eventually erode into unrecognizable shapes. In deep time, almost nothing lasts. But this does not make our presence meaningless. It simply shifts the measure of legacy from permanence to participation. What matters is not that we endure forever, but that we existed, that we contributed to the unfolding of life, that we added our verse to the song. And perhaps our greatest legacy is not in what we leave behind, but in the very act of wondering about legacy, to ask these questions, to reflect on our place, to seek meaning in impermanence. This is part of what makes us human. Our curiosity, our imagination, our longing to connect with something larger than ourselves may be the most enduring thing about us. Even if no trace of our cities or technologies remains, the spirit of reflection may continue in other beings, seeded by us, carried forward as part of the larger experiment of awareness. There is also the possibility that our legacy extends beyond Earth, in ways we cannot yet perceive. If life is common in the universe, then civilizations may share a thread of continuity, passing influence indirectly across space and time. A signal we send today may reach another world long after we are gone, shaping the story of beings we will never meet. Our legacy, then, would not be confined to Earth but spread across the cosmos, one experiment contributing to many others. When we reflect on legacy in this way, it becomes less about monuments and more about meaning. Our lives, individually and collectively, matter not because they will be remembered forever, but because they are part of something larger. The kindness we show, the beauty we create, the questions we ask all ripple outward, influencing futures we cannot predict. Legacy is not about being eternal. It is about belonging to the endless flow of experiments that shape the universe. So let us imagine humanity's legacy not as a monument carved in stone, but as a wave moving outward, subtle but unending. Our presence will leave traces in the earth, in the life that follows us, in the sky, perhaps even in the stars. We may not last forever, but we do not need to. Our experiment is enough. Our phase is enough. Our legacy, fragile yet real, will remain in the fabric of time, a quiet reminder that we were here, that we wondered, that we lived. 20. The endless experiment. When we step back and let our thoughts drift across the full span of Earth's history, a quiet picture begins to form. It is the picture of a planet that has always been restless, always experimenting, always trying new forms of life, new expressions of intelligence, new ways of being. From the earliest microbes in the ocean to the rise of forests and dinosaurs, from the shaping of civilizations to the birth of humanity's own questions, the Earth has never stopped. It has run experiment after experiment, not with perfection in mind, but with possibility. And if there is a lesson in all of this, it is that the experiment never truly ends. To think of life this way is to soften the edges of fear. We often cling to the idea that humanity must last forever, that our extinction would mean the end of meaning. But the record of the Earth tells a different story. Trilobites once filled the seas, and their passing did not end the story. Dinosaurs once ruled the land, and their passing made room for new experiments. Entire civilizations have risen, flourished, and collapsed, and yet life has continued, reshaping itself, carrying forward what could endure. Humanity, too, is part of this flow, one experiment among countless others. Our ending, whenever it comes, will not be the end of life's story. It will simply be a transformation, a passing of the torch to what comes next. This perspective brings both humility and comfort. Humility, because we are not the center of the universe, not the final act of creation. Comfort, because we are part of something larger, something that has been unfolding for billions of years and will continue for billions more. To be part of the endless experiment is to belong to a story so vast we can barely glimpse it, but to know that our lives, however brief, contribute to it. Perhaps this is why so many human traditions speak of cycles. The cycle of seasons, the cycle of birth and death, the cycles of civilizations and stars all remind us that nothing stands still. Everything moves, transforms, and renews. What ends is never wasted. It becomes the foundation for what follows. Even we, in our smallest actions, are part of this rhythm. The kindness we show, the art we create, the questions we ask all ripple outward, becoming part of the experiment's unfolding. There is a temptation to ask what the purpose of it all might be. Are the experiments leading somewhere? Is there a final destination? A greater meaning waiting to be revealed? Perhaps. Or perhaps the meaning is not in the destination but in the process itself, in the endless creativity of life. The spiral does not end, it unfolds. The wave does not stop, it moves. The experiment does not conclude, it continues. The beauty is not in permanence, but in the ceaseless exploration of possibility. If we are only one experiment, then we are also one variation of something far greater. Intelligence has appeared in many forms, on land, in water, in the air. Civilization has risen in countless ways, in human societies, in animal cultures, in ecosystems that function like living networks. The universe itself may be filled with experiments, each star system a new trial, each planet a stage. To us, these experiments seem separate, but perhaps they're all connected, all threads in a tapestry too vast for us to see. And we, fragile though we are part of that weaving. To live with this perspective is to let go of the need for permanence and embrace the wonder of participation. We do not need to last forever to matter. We do not need to be the first or the only. Our lives are meaningful because they are part of the endless experiment, part of the universe's restless creativity. Whether we are observed or not, whether our legacy lasts or fades, we have already belonged. And so the question shifts. Instead of asking how we can endure forever, we might ask what kind of experiment we want to be while we are here. Do we create beauty, compassion, connection? Do we live with care for the earth that has carried so many experiments before us? Do we add our verse to the song in a way that enriches, however briefly, the music of life? These questions matter not because they will guarantee permanence, but because they shape the quality of our participation in the experiment. Imagine for a moment standing on a quiet shore. The waves roll in, one after another, each different, each temporary, yet all part of the same ocean. Our lives are like those waves. Humanity itself is like one wave among countless others. We rise, we move, we fall, but the ocean continues, always experimenting, always flowing. To be a wave is not to be meaningless. It is to be part of the ocean's endless song. And so, as we reach the end of this reflection, we find ourselves where we began, with a sense of wonder. Humanity may be just one of many experiments, but that does not diminish us. It deepens us. It places us within a story larger than we can imagine, a story of life that has no final chapter, only new beginnings. Our time here is brief, but it is real, and it is precious. The endless experiment continues. It has always continued, it always will, and within it, we find our place not as the conclusion, but as participants, as contributors, as one expression of the universe's boundless creativity. To live with this awareness is to live gently, curiously, and with a sense of belonging that reaches far beyond ourselves. We are here. We are part of it. And that is enough.